You're on.
Okay, we are back from our lunch break. We are continuing our August 8th, 2023 Board of County Commissioners meeting. We have several things on the agenda for this afternoon. We're going to take public hearing number 1, a public hearing and final assessment resolution for the Port Salerno New Monrovia Wastewater Municipal Service Benefit Unit. Discussion, it'll be presented by Mr. David Duncan and Mr. Sam Emerson, who I do see is here. Commissioner Smith.
After this, can you take commissioner comments before I head out of here?
Yes, sir. Gentlemen, please come take your seats.
Yes, can you give me just a moment? I'm waiting for Phil Keithley.
Absolutely.
Then make your commissioner comments while we're.
Yeah, would you like to make your commissioner comments now, Commissioner Smith? There he is. And our friend, Mr. Phil Keithley, is here as well. Mr. Keithley, sorry to jump you right into the process. We have residents waiting that have been here all morning. I appreciate the folks from this area that have been here. We appreciate you. Gentlemen, welcome back. Why don't you share with us what's happened since the last time we were here?
Commissioners, good afternoon. I'm going to go through a short presentation, and then we'll move into questions. This is a continuation of the public hearing held on June 20th for the proposed Port Salerno New Monrovia Wastewater Municipal Service Benefit Unit. In 2015, the board directed staff to acquire the services of Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute to perform a study on the effects of septic tank discharges into the St. Lucie River and Indian River Lagoon, specifically related to nitrogen and phosphorus loadings. The final report suggests significant contributions of nitrogen and phosphorus to the St. Lucie estuary watershed, primarily from on-site sewage treatment and disposal systems or septic tanks. Groundwater nitrogen and phosphorus concentrations were significantly higher in the residential community surveyed. As the board is aware, the Utilities Department has been working towards design and construction of a wastewater collection system for Port Salerno, New Monrovia for many years. As part of that endeavor, the Florida legislature approved a $500,000 grant, and the FDEP, Florida Department of Environmental Protection, awarded an $8 million grant in 2022. Subsequent to the public hearing initiated on June 20th, staff was able to obtain another $2 million as an amendment to the original $8 million state grant for a new total of $10 million. Another $2.2 million was budgeted from state revenue sharing funds, as well as franchise fees and utility contributions for an additional $2.1 million, which totals $14.84 million in contributions, reducing the assessable cost for the benefited properties within this proposed municipal services benefit unit. The proposed assessment includes 939 properties at a total of 963 equivalent residential connections. As indicated on this slide, the total project cost is $24,352,621. So now, with the $10 million in a state grant, $500,000 from a legislative appropriations grant, and state revenue sharing with local contributions of $77. The amount of assessable cost is now reduced to $9,511,844. Therefore, that sum is divided by 963 equivalent residential connections for an estimated prepayment amount of $9,877 per connection, and that equates to an annual payment of $620.56 per unit, amortized over a 20-year period at a 1.34% interest rate plus standard fees. Therefore, that sum, this slide is intended to give the board, we're going to have to go back. Excuse me a minute.
Donna, can you help us out?
There's a slide missing.
There it is. Thank you, Donna.
Click on that slide.
I thought Donna was pulling that up.
There you go.
That one?
That one right there.
There we go. Thank you.
This slide is intended to give the board an understanding of the 50/50 state grant match requirements as it relates to the original $8 million grant staff presented to this body at the June 20th hearing, and now with the additional $2 million for a total of $10 million in state grant funding. Looking at the bottom line, far right, you can see that with the new $10 million grant, we are very close to the required 50/50 match at $10.48 million. It would not be able to accept any additional state grant funds to help buy down the assessable cost of this proposed MSBU. Martin County Utilities serves approximately 36,000 water customers, and the average residential customer uses approximately 6,000 gallons per month. The wastewater rate per 1,000 gallons is $4.82, plus a base charge of $19.73. The average residential wastewater customer pays approximately $48.65 per month. With the approval of the final assessment resolution today, the department anticipates commencing construction in October of 2023 and estimates a 23-month construction phase with completion in August of 2025. Lump sum payments of the assessment by property owners would be due by August 15th, 2024, and any payments not received by that date would be shown on the annual property tax bill in November 2024. Staff recommends that the board adopt the final assessment resolution to create the Port Salerno-New Monrovia Wastewater Municipal Service Benefit Unit, and the board authorize the county administrator or designee to execute any documents related to this request. And that can,
Good afternoon, Sam Amerson, Utilities and Solid Waste Department Director. Thank you, and good afternoon, Commissioners. We did also reach out once again. Phil and I, along with John Mayle, made a phone call the end of last week to Angela Connect with the DEP. She's in charge of the Division of Water Restoration Assistance. So she is the director of that department managing these grant funds. We reached out to her. We were informed of some additional grants availability, water quality grant, also Indian River Lagoon grant, and we heard that there was no match required. So we asked that specific question of her, a couple of questions actually. We asked her, can we apply for the Indian River Lagoon grant that requires no match and use that as a local match toward the existing grant? The answer to that was no. We can't use DEP funds that they provide along with additional DEP funds to serve as a local match. So as Phil mentioned, we've reached our match requirements. We really can't utilize any additional funds for the existing $10 million grant. We did ask another question, and that was, what about a scenario where we amend this current grant, give that back, and we apply for $20 million on the Indian River Lagoon grant without a match? She said that's not advisable. You've already got the money. The governor wants this money spent. It's already been allocated, and they're tracking it as already being spent funds, if you will. So we tried to find some scenarios where we could utilize additional funds. If we wanted to try that route, she suggested that it does not require a grant, a local match, but those that provide a match are much higher ranked, and the likelihood of getting funding for additional, like $20 million to cover the entire cost of the project was very unlikely. So I just mentioned that we did attempt to reach out and find some other alternatives, other grant funding, and it was recommended that we keep our current grant with the local match that's already been allocated.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Sam. Phil? Sam, isn't NEP money or a portion of NEP money federal?
Say that again?
Isn't NEP, National Estuary Program funding, isn't a portion or most of it federal?
Yes.
So why does DEP have, what do they have to do with NEP program money?
Well, we're not utilizing NEP program money.
Oh, I thought that's what you said.
No, I'm sorry. It was Indian River Lagoon.
That is Indian River.
Well, yes, it's for the 5 counties. There was, I think, one.
Oh, there was a separate legislative fund that they
Yes.
set up for the Indian River
100
Lagoon.
million for the 5 counties
Okay,
along.
got it. It's not
That
any,
board of the-
it's not Indian River Lagoon program money. It's the
Right.
fund that the legislature set up for the 100 million that they put in.
That's correct.
And so they're not treating that as separate funding? That's considered all still one pot of money from DEP?
That's my understanding, yes. Just to apply to the 5 counties that border
Right.
the IRL.
Huh, I would think that they would want to spend that money on as much as possible, as quickly as possible, but, okay, if they said no, no is no.
One other nuance to that, she indicated or stated that this new IRL money or the water quality money is going to require mandatory connection to the system. So when I went through the questions that are asked on the application, there's a question or a statement that says, it quotes the Florida statute that these customers, if we were successful at that kind of grant, they would be required to connect within 365 days. And so we struggled internally with how would we make that happen? So I don't know how we would accomplish a requirement in a grant agreement that they connect within 365 days that we would have to enforce and actually go on private property and physically make a connection.
So I would imagine that our legislators' staffs are watching this, but this is something we should probably, if you haven't already done, communicate to them. Like, here's like a real-world attempt to use those funds, and maybe it's not working the way that they kind of anticipated that those would work. Because it was touted as being 100 million for Indian River Lagoon that was going to go directly towards things like this, and it's not necessarily that easy. If it were add-on money, that'd be fantastic. So, I have to imagine that others are going to run into the same problem, and maybe they won't be able to spend the money as they thought they were going to be able to spend it.
I would expect so. I think it's going to be kind of a hurry up and wait and see what one of these grant agreements look like for another community. Those are generally posted on the website once they're executed, and see what those provisions actually are in the written grant agreement.
So Dawn, I don't know who communicates with whose staff, but this is something that Sarah maybe ought to be checking with our delegation staff on to see how this actually gets implemented, and are they watching, listening, and understanding that maybe they need to come back next year and do something differently with how it's applied.
We agree, Commissioner. In fact, we've already talked about this internally about also attempting to work with the DEP on the scenario. As we've talked to the residents, we quote the statute about connecting within a year, but the actual enforcement of it is through the health department, and the health department does not require you to connect unless your tank has failed. So that's a legitimate purpose, a way to handle it. We think that meets the intent of the law, and that way someone may not, but if if it is truly mandated, the ability to enter private property without some sort of ownership interest, meaning an easement or a temporary construction easement, and as we all know, most of those in the government, those aren't acquired, they're either acquired voluntarily or you have to use condemnation powers to do that, and we've never used something like that for that. So it would be, I think there are provisions of this that on paper sound good, like in this, on those future grant agreements, but in practicality have some serious private property rights implications that I don't think it's something that we want to do, especially when most of the people are connecting anyway, and there's always going to be a handful of folks who just, for whatever reason, have a new system or simply just don't want to connect. And, that, I think, is just part of of human distribution of facts.
And material.
Yes.
Commissioner Heatherington.
I would think that, because last meeting you mentioned, because I thought it was not mandatory at all unless your septic tank failed, but you mentioned there was a provision that you are assessed immediately, and you do require the residents to connect within a certain period of time. I would think in the eyes,
That's for the 100 million.
that's a policy that last meeting, we stated that was a Martin County policy, which I think, at least I was surprised that I thought your septic tank had to fail if you're connecting. So I would think in the eyes of the state, that would be considered a mandatory connection policy.
That is our belief. Now, I think, there's a difference between our ability to make somebody pay, which I think is, where it goes. You can charge for the facility and the infrastructures that there, but actually making the physical connection is also a separate piece. So we believe our policy meets the guidelines or the intent of the mandatory language, but that's why we need further discussion with the DEP. If they're more forcefully enforcing that provision in future grant applications, it needs further discussion, because having the ability to assess or charge a benefited property under state law is one thing. Having to actually the authority to enter private property and make a physical connection is a separate and distinct issue.
So they need to clarify that rule, but which of the grants require a mandatory connection, the IRL or the water quality?
The ones that are currently available online to apply online is the water quality grant and also an IRL grant, the one we spoke of, the $100 million.
So what I understand, because we just had a meeting with a bunch of DEP folks, there's two pots of money. There's the IRL grant, which applies only to the 5 counties on the Indian River Lagoon, that has $100 million. And then there's the water quality improvement grant, which has $200 million in, which is eligible to the entire state. However, you still could apply if you are in the Indian River Lagoon. One does not require, so the grant that we currently have requires a match. The other one does not require a match, and it sounded, my interpretation of the conversation was they could be combined. You could apply, and the portal's only open till August 31st, so I don't know how in the world the state's going to spend all of this money. That's $300 million. But my interpretation was that you could combine the grant we already have with additional grant funds, and they're two separate pots of money.
Right, and we asked that specific question, and Angela tells us that the grant we have requires a 50% local match. Any additional DEP funding that's available would not be considered local funds.
So if we applied for, let's just say, a $4 million grant from the the Water Quality Improvement Grant, no, the IRL, then we could use that in addition for this or any other project, because that includes design, permitting. They want to see you use the bulk of it in construction, but we could use that in addition.
I think the issue that was promulgated is we just either give up the grants that require the match and start over and go for an entirely new grant, which is one of the options today, and simply turn that money back into the state and then try to get one of these other grants and then not proceed forward with a project until you have a grant contract, and then you have to rebid it depending upon what you have in pricing. It may, and the other key piece of it is that when you compete after these other grants throughout, Brevard County has a big, sales tax initiative to match this. I think they're generating over $100 million alone for their program. They're going to award it based upon who has the highest matches and is shovel ready.
I have some more questions, but I'll wait.
Sure.
I think you were partially finished.
Were you done with your presentation?
Yes, sir, thank you.
You want to keep going, or you
No,
want
wait
to
till
hold?
public comment.
Commissioner Hurd?
Yeah, just for clarity for the match, presumably the DEP requires a match so that the local government has skin in the game, makes an investment, and that's why they require 50%. And you have to get 50, it can't be 60%, it's got to be 50%, because they want us to have a skin in the game, they want us to have an investment. So, we also have water quality requirements at both the state and the federal level. So if we abandon this project, what happens to those requirements? They don't go away.
So Commissioner, John Mayo, before, he's not here this week, but there was a recent bill passed by the state that if you're located within an impaired basin that is within an impaired water, which the St. Lucie estuary is, you'll have 10 years to hook a certain category of properties, less than an acre, which this area all qualifies for, to get hooked up to sewer. The alternative is that the septic systems could be replaced with what they call an advanced wastewater type of system. And our presentations on those to date have been running around $25,000. And I think, as I recall too, they have to be operated by your utility. So the issue is that there are methods that you might be able to avoid having to go to a municipal unified system that relies on, pipes and pumping, and have an on-site system, but that on-site system, I believe, still has to be managed by a utility, and those systems are fairly expensive. So, and we have 10 years to do that. So I think the issue is that if we did not do this project today, we'd have 10 years to get it done.
And it might be much more expensive,
Yes.
and we'd be handling the entire cost. We don't know. I mean,
don't
we've got
know.
$14 million worth of grants here
Yep.
in hand. And I don't know how many more millions of dollars are available down the road. It looks to me like everything has requirements attached.
Yeah, one other nuance of the current grants that we have, the 50/50 match cannot include monies spent, for example, engineering that we spent for this project, anything that was spent prior to the grant agreement being fully executed. And so that comes out of the match, and also the capital facilities charges cannot be utilized as match in our current grants. They're changing that. My understanding, reading through the new applications and talking to Angela at the DEP, that they're gonna be revising those restrictions.
Is that just rulemaking? Legislation?
I don't know.
Commissioner Hurd, anything further?
Nope.
I'm going to go to public comment now. I have a couple of requests to speak forms. If you haven't yet to fill one out but would like to, you have a couple of options. You can speak first and fill it out afterwards and give it to our bailiff, who's waving his hand right there. Or if you don't want to speak, obviously you don't have to. You'll hear a tone. You'll have 3 minutes to address us on the topic. At the 2 minutes and 45-second point, you're going to hear a tone that tells you have 15 seconds to sort of wrap up your comments so we don't cut you off, which I think would be rude. So we're going to start with Miss Jamie Taylor. Ms. Taylor, how are you? Welcome. I'm glad you stuck with us all day. I appreciate your patience.
Actually, I apologize. I had to leave for a little bit.
Okay, welcome back.
Thank you, thank you. Most of us in this area, work, so unfortunately, we couldn't have the numbers that Palm City had, because a lot of us in that area, work. But anyway, I'm Jamie Roll Taylor. I grew up here in Port Salerno. I moved back to take care of my parents, and so I brought my 3 girls with me. And so when I came back, I sort of had my hands full, so I didn't think that I was going to get involved at all, but I have since gotten involved. And so when I came back and I saw that a lot of these projects were sort of in play, I'm all for it. We need it. Our environment means a lot to us. If you guys know a little bit of history about New Monrovia, there was a microwave plant there many, many years ago, before I was gray, right? There you go. Back then, there was a lot of waste. And there was monies at that time to be spent on infrastructure. And New Monrovia never got that infrastructure. I don't know what happened. I don't know why. I feel like that project should have happened then. But it didn't. So we're here at this stage now. And I grew up in a community where we worked hard. We own our homes. I don't know, I'm more of a dialogue type person, but has anybody up here ever lived on a low income, house, on a fixed income?
Every day.
It's hard. Okay, and especially when you're raising 3 girls on your own. Okay. So I understand this may not be large to you guys, but it's a hardship for many, and you're talking about putting liens on people's homes that they've worked hard for to sort of keep in their family and provide generational wealth for their kids. So I'm asking that we actually find grants that can completely fund this project, because I feel like they're out there. My God, how much did we hear about the infrastructure monies that was coming to us in Congress? I mean, this is what it's about. And we want to protect our environment, but at the cost of putting people in jeopardy and at risk of losing their homes. Not only are we paying for the cost of this project, we're also paying for the cost to connect. So it's not just one cost, we're dealing with multiple costs. So I'm just asking if you guys can sympathize, and if you can empathize, that would be great, so that you understand, the position that many people in the area are in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments. Our next request. Our next request to speak for is Mr. Steve English. Mr. English, welcome back.
Good morning, Commissioners, or afternoon now. Appreciate your time. I probably won't be as cordial as Jamie was. Bear with me. I wish I was here standing to support this project, but the cost is too much, so I'm not. At the way it stands, it's just too high of a cost to everybody. So we need to either abandon it as it is or put it on hold again until we can find some more funding. Without the funding, there's just no way any of us are going to support this. The question was asked, we had the informative meeting, and the question was asked how Port St. Lucie could provide the same service for $5,000. And here in Martin County, it's almost 3 times that. It's about $13,000 what we're looking at right now, from best we can gist, per person. The answer that was given was kind of insulting and inappropriate. It was, if you don't like what we are doing here in Martin County, move to Port St. Lucie. We thought that was highly inappropriate for an informative meeting with us, and it aggravated a bunch of people. So this meeting was less informative than the first one, but we did glean from it that it's going to be about $13,000 approximately out of each person's pocket to do this. And that's still too much. We understand that it's a 50-50 match. And what I don't understand is I'd add 1 + 2. If it's a $24 million project, how come the match is only $10.5 million? It should be $12 million. So that doesn't make sense. There's another $1.5 million somewhere, according to just, dummies. So that's one of the things that doesn't add up to us, so we know there's more funding there. We've got a project in Salerno now on the waterfront, on Park Drive. It's going to cost those residents somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000 to connect to sewer and have it. they've got CRA funding and other stuff too. We don't have any of that. None of that's been given to us. We're going to try and get that. We have a NAC meeting, which we're going to try and move some funding around, see if we can't port to this project. But if you approve it today, I'm afraid we'll never get another nickel. So if you approve it today, we're stuck with what we've got. We know if it's approved today that this is the funding, this is what we're going to have, and we're never going to add to it. So I urge you today not to, it doesn't have to be done today. I want to leave you with one more number too, 12 million gallons. That's how much raw sewage just dumped into the Indian River Lagoon, south of Palm Beach County, 3 weeks ago from a sewage treatment plant. 12 million gallons. That's not counting Fort Pierce, their plant sitting right on the Indian River Lagoon, Vero Beach, here. All these treatment plants dump raw sewage into the river one way or another, from a failure, a storm, or whatever. So there may not be the ultimate answer. But what that says is the immediate necessity is not there. So I urge you, commissioners, don't pass this as it stands. Put it on hold, find more funding. The $20 million, if we have to do away with what we've got and try for that, I think we're better off. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Our next request to speak form is Celia Smith. Good afternoon and welcome back.
afternoon. Thank you. It has been a long day, hasn't it? Thank you so much for your time, for everything that you do. I am a longtime resident of Jensen Beach. I totally agree with Andrea Dixon. I go there weekly for my mom. Never see the garbage all the time, but never knew where it was coming from. I found it out today. So thank you for that. I just want to say thank you all for going the way to find the extra $2 million. We really appreciate that. I stand in agreement with Chandler Josie, who spoke earlier this morning, Jamie Rowe Taylor as Mr. English, and also we'll hear from Jennifer Dotson, Cody Kemp, and anyone else that comes up in the New Monrovia. I know you like the way I say her name. Anyone else that comes from the area. I went to the last meeting, and surprisingly different things, because as far as the 50% grant thing didn't come out until the last meeting that we had, that question was brought up. So that's one thing I kind of didn't like about the meetings. We hear some things in one meeting, and you don't get them all. First of all, I want to say numbers is power. I do know that. Worked for the school district for 35 years, and numbers is in power. We had numbers here this morning, but of course, Palm City was a very lengthy thing, so some people are not able to be here today. But I am not in silence. I stand. My voice will be heard. Those voices were here today to be heard, but some of them could not come back. I myself am retired from giving 35 years to Martin County. And I don't want to go back to work. I'm be 65 years old next month. So if I have to go and deal in this, well, my mortgage has went up due to homeowner's insurance. I still have a mortgage. Taxes now you're saying is going up from the waste management. Now I have to look at other taxes that are going to be added on with this project here of the sewer. Yes, we need it. And then I found out in the meeting I got to come out $3,000 because my septic is in the back of my yard. So all these different added on things that we're hearing, we cannot be compared to Golden Gate. That came up in the last meeting. Golden Gate is rental. We're most single family. We have elderlies in our area that live on a fixed income. And I guess I can say I'm not elderly, but my income is fixed. So I ask that you really look, and I'm not going to go into any of the detail because I say I'm sure Jennifer is coming behind us, and we support her, and we support this. And if the project has to be put on hold, however it may be, and that was the question that was asked. And I thank God there was a young lady in our meeting from Golden Gate, and this lady really laid it out on the line because there were some things that was kind of like smooth, and she brought things out that actually helped out. But if all the information should be given at one time, we shouldn't have to be going back and forth. So thank you for your time.
Ma'am, thank you very much. I have one final request to speak form. If anybody else would like to address us, now is the time to tell us. You can come forward and speak and fill the form out afterwards. Sir, are you standing up to come this way? Okay. You can come up first. I'm saving this one. You look very familiar, sir. I think you
Hello,
got some
everybody.
years in your community.
Commissioners, I thank you for your time. I know all of you all either in a professional way or on a personal level, and I consider some of you my very best of friends. I want you to know that you're in a bad position today, and it's not because of you. It's because of your predecessors, okay? They got you here. Talking about a history lesson, real quick, I am a third-generation resident of New Monrovia, okay? For the most part, that little section there off of Cove Road, let's face it, I gotta tell you, it was known as the black section or the colored section. We were shortchanged in those days. I hate to bring that up, but that's the truth. How in the world, if we're a historic community and we still don't have the basic things? In the 30s, our census population here in Martin County was like a little over 5,000. In the 60s, it was like 16,000. In the 70s, it was 28,000. In the 90s, it was just over 100,000. As of 2020, we're pushing about 160,000. These residents of New Monrovia, they stuck with Martin County before it was even Martin County. They were some of the most hardworking, dedicated, law-abiding citizens that you will ever see. They helped to build Martin County. But because we're low in numbers, even as we stand now, Martin County only have a black population of about 5%. So we're not threatening to you in any way. And that has not served us well. Because what happened in the 60s, I remember my dad lobbying Commissioner Jack Sanderson to try to get a light for the train on Cove Road. It went on deaf ears until, guess what? A lady from Miles Grant got killed. Wasn't a person of color. They put a light there. In the 60s, okay, we were there and we were lobbying, at the time, Commissioner Doc Myers, just to try to get some paved roads. But across on Salerno Road, they had dead-end streets, paved. Dead-end streets. Wasn't right, but you know, we just got shortchanged. I'm just telling you like it is. And in the 70s, we lobbied Commissioner Elmira Gainey to finally get some water. And we kind of got that water. I think Commissioner Hurd was coming in on the same time. And here we stand today, 2023, and we still don't have sewer. I mean, that's a sin and a shame. That's a most basic thing. Now, I'm all for it. I can pay for it. But you know what? A lot of those people on fixed income, I'll give you a quick example. We got a lady there like 90 years old. She owned like 5 different pieces of property. 3 of them are rentals, and some of them are single family lots. She's told that's gonna come at her. Man, if you think people can, I heard your budget hearings the other day. You're saying it's not sustainable. Do you think this is sustainable? So I think you need to put it on hold until we can do something about it. These people can't afford this. If you think they can afford this, then you must be smoking something.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I have our last request to speak form. Anybody else? Our last request to speak form is Miss Jennifer Dotson Cody Kemp. Ms. Kemp, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back. Well, I really don't know where to start. I'm so just thrown back by all of the different pieces of information that have been piecemealed out to us. First of all, thank you so much for going back to the well. Thanks for your staff to going back and getting an additional $2 million. It's wonderful when you go back, you think the well is dry and there's more water. But I will tell you, after the June 20th meeting, we mobilized. We got out there, we sent emails, we made phone calls, and went to work researching a new grant, finding some additional money. June 30th, I gave the information to Commissioner Hurd. Me and her had a call. And as of last week, no one had reached out to this administration yet. So I know there was a meeting held last August, or August 2nd, last Wednesday. That's a whole 45 days kind of gone. Secondly, this whole 50% match thing, if that had come out the first meeting in June 20th, we probably might not even be here at this point, because we were almost at 50% at that time. The $2 million basically kind of put us up there. Matching what? So is the county matching anything? Because it's like the people are being held responsible for the match. All of us are paying for the match. The county isn't, because all of this funding is state grants, 10.5 million from state grants, state revenue sharing. Maybe this utility contribution, is that from the county? Sounds like it's coming from the utility department. I don't feel like the county, there's money here. The county has money. They came up with $4 million this morning to buy a piece of land for Palm City. So there's money here. We can find it. I'm sure we can all work together and find it. A couple other things I want to mention is the fees. When I was looking at your slide and all of the extra fees, the 2.5%, 2.75% GSM fees, 4% for early discount fees. I'm not sure why that's a fee if it's an early discount. The 2% tax collector fees, that's an extra additional $2,500 that's being added on to the cost if you have to pay it over time, which most of us are. I'd also like to revisit the opportunity to have the water company take this out, put it on the bill, just like St. Lucie County does, on a monthly basis. I know you say you don't want to be a collections agency, but you already are. If I don't pay my water bill gets cut off. You are a collections agency. So that alleviates the liens that are being put on our homes if we have to go the tax route. And I know we were trying to figure out what these liens actually mean. Are they the same kind of liens that, a construction lien, where it keeps you from unable to access your equity, can't sell your house, is that kind of lien where people can come in and buy tax certificates and take ownership of people's properties? So I got 15 seconds left. Look, we're going to fight for the legacy. I understand that the bid is expiring now or in the next 10 days because we got a 60-day extension. That's not today from the 20th. But we got to find some way to preserve the legacy of this neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment at this time? Coming back to the board, Commissioner Heatherington, you had your light on.
Yes, still do. So, George, it's not that we would use ARPA funds, but does this neighborhood would that be in a ARPA designated area? Not for ARPA funds, but is it would it have qualified for ARPA funds?
Newman, Rovia, Port Salerno is in what is a qualified census tract. So I can't speak to water funds, but ARPA related to the entire county. It would depend on what the federal profile was. There are certain grants, when you are in the qualified census tract, there is a no match requirement. But however, I think what staff was saying to you earlier is even in those cases, the federal entity and sometimes the state entity will weight points based on a pointed system. They'll give more points for those municipalities that have local match dollars.
Okay, no, I understand. I just wanted to know if it was eligible because, at the Indian River Lagoon Council Board, which we represent 5 counties, now we have gotten, not EPA funds that are being directed specifically for census tract areas. There's all that federal dollars. Again, I wouldn't imagine that would be eligible for a grant, but there might be some small monies, that board could discuss for connections. Every little bit helps. Listen, what Jamie Roll says, I sympathize and empathize. Now is probably not the time that people can bear all this burden. And there's $300 million worth of grants. I get it. If we apply for additional grants for this project, we might not get a grant for the next project. But I don't think every project is painted equally. In Lighthouse Point in Palm City, when I lived there, we had our assessment years and years ago. Everybody in Lighthouse Point wanted to build, 3-bedroom to 5-bedroom houses. They had a lot of incentive to, I don't remember what it was, pay, connect. Not every neighborhood is, I think, created equally, and I think that we owe it to go out and we have until August 31st to apply for some of these portals. I wouldn't mind pushing off the bid. I know that Centerline will probably not reapply. You know what? The risk is that it may be higher. It may be competitive. There are more contractors that are less busy. There probably will be more busy, but I would be willing to go and search for other funding options for this particular project.
Thank you, Commissioner. Staff?
So-
Dias.
Mr. Chair, I apologize, you know, the order of the board items, the next item, if we're the next one up, we do have what's called Community Development Block Grant, as well as State Housing Initiative Program money, and that those individuals that are income qualified, there's the Community Development Block Grant dollars are federal dollars that are handed through to the state of Florida, and that's where the federal subsidy comes in, and that is where your qualified census tract and your income eligible, that's what the feds would call the prescriptive element as it relates to income eligibility and those who would have a hard time affording the connection. So that would be the federal answer, Commissioner. So I apologize I didn't bring that up in my last answer, but we have that program available, and we also have some other programs available for those who are, my wife usually and my mom will hit me when I say those who are senior, you know. So we have those programs available, and we can present that in the next board item if those folks want to stick around and see that.
George, I think that there are other programs that we have not explored, like the EPA and some of those dollars that we just haven't, because it hasn't been high on our radar or necessary.
Thank you. Gentlemen, you had an opportunity to hear from some of our public speakers this afternoon, excuse me. Any feedback or response and reply to what you've heard? I have some questions for you, but I wanted to give you an opportunity while you still hear those comments in your
Can't
head.
think of any additional comments or clarifications at this point.
Okay, thank you. I have some questions. The concept of adding the cost of this new service to a monthly bill versus a lien, can you explain why that's not an option, or is it an option that you just need us to tell you it needs to be an option?
I haven't explored that, other than the cost would be the same over a 20-year period. If that's the period that you choose, I think the annual cost would be the same. It depends on the interest charges. There are some other fees you saw in here for the
That's
tax
my-
collector and others.
my
Those
question.
could be eliminated, and it would be whatever amount we could borrow that money, where it was a bank loan or what have you. You know, I think you mentioned someone earlier, interest rates are around the 7% value. We would need to finance that.
The lien that is there, I had always assumed that the way this lien worked is that it stayed with the house and not with the owner. But I've heard both at the last meeting, through some public comments, and today, can you explain the type of lien that you're speaking of? Is it like a construction lien? Is it something where just the bill is attached to the address, so that if a resident has it for 3 years and then they sell it, do they have to pay that lien off as part of the closing costs, or does the cost stay with the house?
My understanding, it can be paid off if the house sells, or it can be transferred to a new owner. I think that depends on the buyer and the seller. But I would defer to legal as far as how it constitutes a lien.
We call it an assessment. It runs with the land. It does not have to be paid off when you purchase. Now, someone might require that to be paid off if they want to buy the property, but it's a non-ad valorem assessment for a benefit to the property, and it runs with the land, not the person. So it's not like a tax lien or, a federal tax lien or a contractor's lien. It's a different thing that's imposed by the operation of Florida law, which is why we're having these public hearings and doing it that way. But it's added onto the tax bill so that it's a means of affordability and collection.
Thank you. Does it hinder in any way a person's ability to get a second mortgage or refinance their home?
I
mean, if it's with
not
the
a
land,
real estate agent or a professional. I don't think so. I mean, if the assessment's on the piece of property, it's just part of would be factored in my opinion, factored in when you were doing your purchase and sale agreement. You know, you would understand that there's that amount of money that's still there. So
Commissioner, I think it would, in the loan, it would apply to the extent that when you're looking at somebody's ability to pay, and you look at what the typical tax bill would be against their income, it would affect your ability to borrow based upon it is a tax obligation to your income, but it's not a, that's what it would show up as.
Thank you. So it would show that the $620 annually would have to be part of what you would use your debt-to-income ratios and the rest of it.
Yes.
Thank you. Next question, I see it down here. Annual payment includes a 2% tax collector fee, a 4% early discount. I don't know what that means either. Does that mean you're collecting 4% for people that are going to get an early discount?
Yeah, so the Commissioner, the tax, if you pay your taxes early, and your total bill gets discounted by 4%. So when you get your bill in October, November, then you have a certain time period that if you pay, you pay 4% off your total bill. So that's included in there so if you pay your tax bill early, you won't pay that 4%. If you don't, if you wait to pay till, when is it, April or so, March, then you're going to, your property taxes won't include that 4% discount. But so the presumption is you have to, when we're collecting these funds, you have to base it upon what is the likely amount that you're actually going to receive. And most people with a mortgage, they pay early, and that 4% is included. The tax collector's fee is automatic. We all pay that. And sometimes you see some of that come back to the board in terms of revenues from the tax collector. So 6% is all related to our tax collector and how we collect funds from property.
And 2.75% GSM?
That's the cost for our all of the financial folks, that the outside consultants that we use to pay. We pay them also annually to keep all the rolls and to make sure if somebody pays early, that it gets removed from the rolls properly. So they're part of ensuring that the assessment roll is created legally, and they also maintain the rolls throughout the life of the program till the very end to ensure that nobody is, if anybody pays it off early, that it gets removed and that all of the debts are paid.
We've heard folks say, and I need someone to verify, that other counties don't charge these fees?
I think the question about Port St. Lucie was, they started their sewer program after the fires in the mid-90s, and so there was a vast public investment from them in building and using some special districts to build the infrastructure. So over 20 years ago, they built all that infrastructure. They did not make anybody hook up at the time. They still have an ongoing program, so a lot of people have the infrastructure in their front yard that they can pay to hook up. Of course, that cost for that infrastructure at the time seemed a lot, but it was certainly a lot cheaper than it is today. So $1990 are a lot cheaper than $23.
I appreciate that. My question is, does Port St. Lucie or St. Lucie County charge these fees?
Well, I think in any time there's a special using a non-ad valorem assessment process, the tax collector fee and the discount fee they just go with non-ad valorem assessments. The same thing happens if you use a solar energy type of conversion where you can, some of the other providers do non-ad valorem assessments. So if that's just part of any non-ad valorem assessment, that 6% is always going to be included. How you treat the fees for managing the overall cost to manage the assessment rolls. I think most communities use an outside firm because it's more efficient. Some people will try to do it internally with staff to maintain rolls, which means you would pay for it with your internal staff somehow.
It just seems to me that some of these are costs of doing business for us. I still have more points, but Commissioner Smith wants to jump in.
I'm just going to tag on to what Don was saying, just and I don't know the answer to this, but Port St. Lucie may have decided to pay those fees internally.
I'm saying.
I don't know. I don't know that answer, but if they're not charging them, they may just have decided that they're going to pay the fees internally
Business.
and not pass that on. I don't know.
I think some of their programs are not, they're not using the non-ad valorem assessment program as was suggested. They're putting it on the utility bill so that when you put it on your utility bill, you're not using the tax collector as your agent. You're using your utility staff to manage the collection side of things. So it's just a different form of a business tool. And the non-ad valorem assessment is, it's a powerful tool, obviously, for an MSBU, and especially financing larger projects.
Thank you. Commissioner Hurd.
Yeah, I'm going to move that we postpone the project and that we pursue vigorously understanding monthly payments, additional state and federal grants. This project is an enormous, of enormous importance to me. I agree with Mr. Anderson that this neighborhood is underserved. So, and it's unusual in that there are very few renters. It's people living in the homes that they've been paying mortgages on for decades, and now they own them.
Thank you. I had a couple more points that if this is going to come back, I'd like to address for this and others. I appreciate that. I personally, since we're jumping right to the end here, I am in favor of adding it to the monthly bill instead of the liens. It separates it out. It makes it a monthly, it's a smaller thing that can be handled. It eliminates a lot of these percentages, doesn't just push them back onto us, it changes them. So that's my personal opinion. I'm also have some very serious concerns about people that own multiple lots, a single house, but they have a large side yard because it's really 3 lots. They're not talking about the 9,000 or the 3,000 or whatever, or 13. They're talking times 3. I have an issue with that, and I also have an issue with lots that don't have houses on them. If you owned a lot and you don't have a house, how are we charging you for the septic? I get, and I want to say this, it's important, and I would hope that some of the folks that speak today, Mr. Keithley has been at this for a really long time. Mr. Emerson is newer to us, but he's from the city of Stuart. They have a professional team. I have worked with them in multiple neighborhoods, sometimes where people were desperate to have these services and wanted them at any cost. We've had meetings where people were willing to come forward and put the money up front because they're so desperate to have them, and they're far down the line. But on the other hand, I don't want to sit up here and be part of a situation where we're going to put people in absolute financial distress. I want septic to sewer, we all do. But when we hear about that, we start to think about unintended consequences. Some of the folks that talked today, or that couldn't, and I apologize that they were, people work and came, and then we had a whole long meeting of something else. I agree. So like I said this morning, we represent you. We have to hear you. Our staff has to hear you. These guys did an excellent job. They squeezed basically a stone and found another $2 million. I am concerned when they say, in their professional opinion, it might be tricky. But as Commissioner Hurd said, I'm not opposed to rolling the dice for more money, because if you can't pay 12 and you can't pay 9, and you got to get to a number that people say we could do. The final thing I would say, and the comment came up this morning about, this morning, is I'm willing to use all of my district funds, not the CRA, because you're not in the CRA necessarily, or if you can, good for you, use it. I'm going to increase the district funds because the district will pay those advantages for the district. And I would hope that my colleagues will look at that and not say that we put the Palm City bill on you all. That money will have to be found within the district. And I would hope that whether it's, I don't spend other commissioners' money, but we heard you, and that Commissioner Hurd, this is your district, correct? You have the ability within the district to knock some of this down by getting creative in the financing within MSTU and CRA TIF. show these residents that live in the district that this money can come from them. So Jensen and Palm City and everybody else will chip in. It's how it's appropriate, because the next group, as we said this morning, Palm City will be next, and whoever is next on the list. How many names, how many communities are on the list?
We've got Coral Gardens and Rocky Point.
They're coming. You know, this is I like what Commissioner Heatherington said. Every community has to be looked at individually. And what is the exact circumstances? And my friend Anthony said that it's your turn and that you haven't been given the opportunities that others have. I would like to believe that that is not true. That's probably true. Probably true, and your voices are being heard on behalf of all the other residents that couldn't come and be here today. I'd entertain a second for Commissioner Hurt. Thank you. We have a second. It's frustrating for our staff because I know they've dealt up the perfect opportunity for you all, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
They've worked hard.
They definitely worked hard, and I'm concerned because I want people to know there's no one working harder to make that number as low as possible than these gentlemen and their team. But if it doesn't work, then it's our responsibility, the five of us, to ask them to continue to look. And if there's more funds available, these are the guys, and our other staff will find it. So, anything further? Gentlemen, anything further?
No, sir.
Sure, this has just been perfect for you, this whole agenda item.
We understand your concerns, and we'll march forward with your.
And I'm sure they're your concerns. I don't want people to think that you two are stone-cold killers, that that you get this, that you get it, and you'll continue to try. But last comment, understand that by postponing this, this deal is off the table. The contract and the on-the-table money.
Right, there's a
Where-
contract later on the agenda under Department 2, which will need to be withdrawn. Correct.
And the residents are looking at this wide-eyed and open-minded to understand that we're sending these gentlemen and their team to go back out and find more money, but we're giving this money, we're taking it off the table for the time being.
Keeping the grant money, right?
Well, we'll let the grant ride a little while longer while we search for additional funds or new money to replace this grant. Whatever that takes, we'll search that out and.
I know you will. Commissioner Smith, you're getting the final word.
And it just, I think with your cautionary suggestions, having replaced a drain field earlier this summer, it's twice the cost of what you're seeing.
Yes.
And no financing.
And no financing.
We have a motion by Commissioner Hurd to postpone and sort of look again, seconded by Commissioner Heatherington. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so while you're sitting there, let's take that other item and just have it.
You said it was Department 2.
Public hearing number 2. Public hearing to consider adoption of a final assessment resolution for fiscal year 2024 solid waste assessment and certification of the special assessment role to the tax collector. Mr. Emerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Again, for the record, Sam Emerson, Utilities and Solid Waste Department Director. The Board of County Commissioners is required to adopt the final assessment resolution for fiscal year 2024 single-family solid waste assessment rates. On July 11, 2023, the Board adopted the initial assessment resolution for the FY24 solid waste assessment. A notice of public hearing had been published and mailed by first-class mail to each property owner proposed to be assessed, notifying such property owner of the opportunity to be heard at this hearing. The Solid Waste Municipal Service Benefit Unit provides services to approximately 48,983 residential units in the county. On January 12, 2021, the board approved a new franchise agreement with Waste Management, allowing for an annual CPI rate adjustments ranging from a minimum of 2% to a maximum of 4%. The single-family dwelling unit rate for FY24 for the solid waste MSBU services by Waste Management is proposed to be $421.65, and that is comprised of $286.68 for collection, $108.15 for disposal cost, and $26.82 for administrative cost. The change in the amount assessed in the prior year of $405.55 is due to an increase in the solid waste collection rate and in the amount of solid waste generated per household. Chris Traber, the County Special Assessment Counsel, has reviewed the resolution and the agenda summary and confirmed that the form of each is proper. If I could refer to a computation table, this is the table we prepare each year that shows the prior 3 years of assessments for the solid waste MSBU. You'll see this rate is proposed on an annual basis of $421.65. This is an annual increase of $16.10. This equates to an additional or an increase in cost of $7.74 per pickup, 32 cents per week, or $1.34 per month. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Amerson? Anyone from the public looking to address us on this topic? So say it again, $16 per year increase?
$16.10 per year,
Thank you.
$1.34 per month.
Okay.
Move approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Hurd, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins for staff's recommendation. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Opposed. The motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Heatherington dissenting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take up the item that we've been pushing back. I think, is it 9:30 yet? It's 9:30.
Somewhere.
What item is that? Departmental number 3, at 9:30 a.m. preset affordable housing.
Before we do that, can we?
Oh, yes, you want to make your commissioner comment?
I'm going to bump up against 3 o'clock shortly.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Smith.
So if we had had commissioner comments this morning, I was going to share with you what I'm going to share with you now. Last week was a really big week, and there was actually a day last week that was a really big day in Martin County for education. So in Jensen Beach, the school board did the ribbon cutting for the new Jensen Beach Elementary School, which was fantastic. We left there and went out to Indiantown. Indiantown did its official opening or ribbon cutting, I guess, if you will, for the new Indiantown High School. And then Palm City Elementary, I think you also had that afternoon, correct?
Ribbon cutting then.
Ribbon cutting for that as well. And so as part of all of that great stuff that was going on, I don't know if you did the ceremony at Palm City Elementary for
did.
the Masons.
Yes.
But the Masons of Martin County and the Acacia Lodge did a cornerstone laying for Jensen Beach Elementary, and apparently they also did one for Palm City Elementary. And it's been shared with me that I need to bring this ask to the board, because apparently I don't have the ability to do this, that I ask you if you would be interested in allowing us, at least for the 2 new fire stations in Jensen Beach, to also do a cornerstone ceremony laying of the cornerstone for our 2 new fire stations. And so that is my ask of you, that if you all are in agreement with that. We do have a meeting set up tomorrow, which was why it was important to get this discussed today, to meet with the fire chief and the Acacia Lodge folks and discuss the particulars.
They asked me the same thing. It's a very solemn ceremony. They do it at schools. I was at Citrus Grove Elementary a long time ago. Yeah. And they do it and the school district does it on their buildings. We haven't really done it at the county. They had made that same request of me. I am not opposed to it. I think it's a solemn ceremony. It's steeped in tradition, and it's a nice little touch. They put a time capsule into the cornerstone, and I don't see it as any kind of a negative. So I would back Commissioner Smith's suggestion.
I agree.
So I would, just because I'm sure I'll be asked in the future if there was a motion to direct staff to do so, I would move that we allow our fire stations the ability to do cornerstones with the Acacia Lodge and the Masons.
Second.
Thank you very much. We have a motion by Commissioner Smith as stated, seconded by Commissioner Heatherington. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
Very much.
Thank you for that. Okay, appreciate it. We have a couple of our staff, and I know some professionals behind them that have been working on this issue. It's housing, but then also we're going to hear a Live Local, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Stokas, Ms. Miller, you are recognized.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Assistant County Administrator George Stokas for our preset this morning. With me today is our Health and Human Services Director, Michelle Miller. Behind her is our new Housing Coordinator, Julie Stilettos. I got the name wrong. And then, of course, with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, represented by Mr. Tom Lanahan. This is one of your regular updates for affordable housing. In 2022, this body recognized that access to affordable housing was an issue that required staff's attention. You've requested we periodically update you as to where we are at. Before you on the screen is the goals that were set up by this body for home ownership. We're going to give you a brief, quick update as to where we're at with each of these, and then we're going to go into our state and federal partners. And then Mr. Lanahan will follow it up with the recent passage of the Live Local Act. I will say with the Live Local Act, again, there is a lot of interpretation. We are not lawyers. They will get challenged, I'm sure, in court. I'm sure there will be different interpretations, but we will update you as to where we believe we're following the law. So, and that's why Ms. Elder is here, I think, as well. So, for home ownership, development of a community land trust, I'm happy to report through the efforts of Mr. Jenkins and his folks, we have been invited to attend the first meeting of the Martin County Community Land Trust. It is either this week or next week. I apologize, I don't remember. 24th. It's the 24th. It's 2 weeks away from now. Beautiful. The growth management staff is also working on inclusion of tiny homes into the comprehensive plan. That can by all means be further included. However, we have determined there are certain areas where those homes are allowed. We presented that at the previous update. Staff has done its best job to prioritize capital improvement projects that assist with home ownership, and we are still working and moving forward with our neighborhood revitalization programs. Finally, we are still continuing to monitor for public-private partnership opportunities. That's being primarily done right now through the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. I am happy to report it does seem that some of our not-for-profit partners have closed in on some properties within the city of Stewart and are going to be making those available probably with some tiny home component, as well as using a local manufacturer from Palm City. As far as affordable rentals, Ms. Miller has been very busy with her staff. We're looking to continue a sustained rental subsidy program for income-eligible populations, also as an effort because of the cost of the average home being so high and not able to be eligible under some programs. Ms. Miller is going to present to you some of a new program that we have applied for through a regional partner. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm going to start out this afternoon by just going over what some of our funding is for our overall housing programs, and we'll break it down for you into which each program is. So the first one is our State Housing Initiative Partnership, our SHIP funds, and this is our strategies for our 2003 to 2026 Local Housing Assistance Plan. And these are the uses that the SHIP funds can be used for and the amounts that go with each strategy. Owner-occupied rehabilitation, which is primarily our most popular, emergency repair, purchase assistance with or without rehab, sewer and drinking water hookups, disaster repair or mitigation, demolition and reconstruction, special needs housing, and then finally, we're going to be going to the AHAC in September and asking for a change to the LHAP to add a rental strategy. So here you'll see what some of the income qualifications are for the SHIP program. It starts at 30% of our AMI, which is $84,800, and it goes up to 120% of the AMI. So these numbers are for a family of 4. Special needs population are a requirement and a set aside that we have to meet for each fiscal year. This slide shows the funding that we currently have. So we are allowed to have 3 funding years open at one time. So in the green, you'll see these are the amounts that we have open right now in our pending closing. So hopefully within the next few meetings from now, you'll be getting some closeout reports that these years will be closed out. And as soon as they are, then we'll be getting those allocations in yellow, the 1.5 million and the 1.8 million. And one of the reasons why we wanted to add the rental strategy was because the amount that we're getting for 23, 24, and the 1.8 is significantly higher than we've ever got. So we felt like this is a good time to add rental assistance as a strategy. The next funding source that we have is our Community Development Block Grant, and you'll see here what some of the housing assistance are allowable under this grant. It has to be in unincorporated parts of the county as opposed to SHIP, which could be any part of Martin County. It will allow for, again, sewer water hookups, owner-occupied rehabilitation, and demo and reconstruction. And oftentimes, we will use those two funds together, so someone can use SHIP funds and funds from Community Development Block Grant if they have maybe a tear-down rehab that would cost more than $165,000. They could layer those two funding sources together. And then again, you'll see the numbers for qualification here, which mirror the SHIP qualifications for income-eligible individuals based on a household of 4. For both SHIP and CDBG, there are some repayments required. They differ depending on the strategy. Some of them are grants. For instance, emergency rehab or disaster rehab in SHIP, those are grants and not eligible for repayment.
And Mr. Chair, just to add and opine, because we have been, staff as well as you, we've been active in the 4-County Coalition on Housing. One of the legislative acts from that group is the differentiation between average median income, which is just monies that's received in, whether it's through mail or there's no difference as to how the money is received versus average wage. That's going to be an ask because there is a big difference between income and wage, especially in Martin County, and our other county partners have agreed to put that on their legislative ask for these type of grants, both federally as well as state. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
And then this is the new program that George mentioned, that we're looking at providing some rent relief for Martin County seniors. So this would allow from HUD dollars, so these are federal funds, that would allow for a monthly rental assistance, a security deposit up to 2 months' rent, a utility deposit, and electric, gas, or water and trash deposits. The requirements for this would be 62 years of age or older, residing or working in Martin County, but the units would have to be located in Martin County, must have gross annual incomes at or below 60% of that AMI, and the applicants will be accepted on a first-come, first-served basis. So what happens in this case, and you'll see on the next slide, these are our allocations. So how this works is that the renter would only have to pay 30% of their income, whatever that is, including utilities, to whatever their rent is. We use a calculation called rent reasonableness, which basically you take the average rents in Martin County, and that gives us a starting point of what types of rents we're looking at, and then say the person has a rent of $1,000, they would only pay 30% of that, including whatever their utilities are, and then the grant would pay the rest. And that would be allocated until those funds are expended, and we are part of the St. Lucie Consortium, and that is who administrates this for us. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much. Questions for staff from the commission? Questions from the public for staff? Seeing none, we appreciate that update very
Thank you.
much.
Chair, our next
Thank you.
presentation will be by Mr. Tom Lanahan in regards to Senate Bill 1.
I'm sorry, 1 second, if you would like to come forward as we reset the desk. Just again, state your name for the record, please.
Sorry, Jamie Roll Taylor. I just had a quick question, because I know a lot of people are looking into assistance. Am I looking at the right person? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
It's hard because I see the back of the head, so
That's what she looks like from the front.
I'm like, we need to turn this a little bit. I know you guys don't want to see my backside either. But anyway, I know once we do get the sewer set up, which we desperately want, I don't want anybody to think we don't, there are going to be a lot of individuals who will need assistance hooking up. So when do they sort of submit, or what's the process?
So once the project has been completed.
Okay.
And it's ready for the hookups, then that's when they can apply.
Okay, so they shouldn't be contacting you ahead of time?
No,
Getting
not
on,
yet,
like,
not
this
until the
waiting
project
list?
has been completed.
Okay, all righty, I'll let them know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Miller, for all that you're doing. Mr. Lanahan, thanks for sticking with us all day. You're going to
you.
offer up some very important information.
It's been an informative day. Yes, thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. Tom Lanahan, Executive Director, Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. This is my second visit here on the Live Local Act. Last time I was here, it was not in effect yet. It is in effect now. It started July 1st, 2023. And last time I did this, I like to start off with, this is the statement of legislative intent that is in the statutes. And it's the intent of this act to articulate a state housing strategy that will carry the state towards the goal of ensuring that each Floridian has safe, decent, and affordable housing. This strategy must involve state and local governments working in partnership with communities and the private sector, and must involve financial as well as regulatory commitment to accomplish this goal. So, you know, when someone's writing legislation, they put out there, okay, what's our intent on this? And then all the detail is supposed to achieve that intent. I think as we look into this, and then as we try to apply it, and then as we have a discussion about, you know, potentially what are some changes that communities would like to see in the act, it's important to keep this as kind of a guide stone of what the state's intent was when they did this, and hopefully that works. Okay. Focusing, there's a lot of features to this. I'm going to touch on primarily the local government authority-related aspects of it, and then a little bit on the funding and such. So there are a couple different types of preemption in there. There's a current program that existed before this law that was actually not a preemption, but it was an option for you, where you could approve affordable housing on existing commercial or industrial zoned property without having to change the land use, without having to change the zoning. That was an option for local governments to use. The next type of activity in there is that you would have to authorize multifamily and mixed-use residential in commercial or mixed-use zoning if at least 40% of the units are affordable. Another key preemption is no rent control is allowed. And then there's also a property tax exemption for affordable housing that has a mandatory program. If they meet the requirements, they get the exemption, and then an optional program that you could adopt if you wanted to. And then we'll cover some other aspects of interest, some revisions to the state housing strategy, funding. Are people taking advantage of this new program yet or not? And then like I mentioned earlier, feedback to the legislature. So the voluntary program, and this was already in statute. Again, if it's affordable, if you got 10% of the units meeting the affordable requirement, that's between 30 and 120% of AMI. And these numbers are ever so slightly old. The AMI is actually 84,800 now. Okay, big whoop, right? Move $300. And then the low end of that range is around 24,000 plus or minus, and the high end is 101,760 for a family of four. Again, this is not a preemption; it's a flexible option for you, and cities have this same authority. Now to the stuff that came in with the Live Local Act. The county must, this is a preemption, authorize multifamily and mixed-use residential in commercial or industrial or mixed-use zoning if at least 40% of the units are affordable. You may not require a land use or zoning change or a comp plan amendment. You may not require special exception, any of the conditional use, all the different ways that we label those sorts of public hearing requirements. You may not restrict the density below the highest allowable density on any unincorporated land in the county where residential development is allowed. It says anywhere in the county. You may not restrict the height below the highest currently allowed height for commercial or residential development within the county, within the jurisdiction of the county, so again, unincorporated, within 1 mile of the proposed development or 3 stories, whichever is higher. The project would have to be administratively approved without action by the Board of County Commissioners.
Can you say that one again?
Yes, it
Explain
would.
that for the-
Sure, it would have to be administratively approved. That means it does not have to go to the Board of County Commissioners or your Planning Commission for a public hearing or any sort of a hearing or action. The county's chief zoning officer, however that is couched, would be the person that would do those approvals. So that would be a staff level approval. Now, it has to meet all of the other requirements of your codes. This isn't a blanket wiping out of setbacks and parking and landscaping and access and drainage and water and sewer hookups and all those other things that you require in your land development regulations. They would still have to meet. This just addresses the density limitations and the height limitations. Let's see if I covered everything in there. Yep. And then the county is also charged to consider, whatever that may mean, and I'll throw my hand over to your attorney, consider reduced parking requirement if the development is within half of a mile of a major transit stop. That's something that you all get to define. And the stop is accessible to the development. So I would take that as, you've got a stop on one side of the interstate, a development on the other side. Yeah, it's within a half a mile, but, without a helicopter, you can't get to the stop. So that probably wouldn't count. So accessible would need to be proven there. Have to meet all the other state and local laws. So again, it doesn't exempt someone from water management district permitting or some of those other sorts of things. This provision is in effect for 10 years, starting this past July. And then again, there's an identical set of provisions in the correct section of statute that governs city actions. Again, continuing on the some of the other issues, no rent control allowed. It's my understanding there was only one county in the state that actually had a rent control regimen. It was up in the center part of the state, so that's now illegal. And then property tax exemption, an optional program which you can put your hand up if you want to do that. 50 dwelling units, 20% of them have to be affordable. And then depending on how much is affordable, you get some different exemptions. The mandatory program, so this would be in effect now, if they have at least 70 affordable dwelling units, and they're renting to folks making between 80 to 120% of that AMI that we talked about, 75% of that value is exempt. If they rent them to the lower income category, then they can get 100% exemption on the value of those units. And that lasts until 2059. So that's obviously much longer than the 10 years of the zoning provision.
To stop you for
Yes,
a
sir.
moment, that means that the certain taxes will still be collected, school tax, fined, Children's Services Council. It just means that our ad valorem taxes.
Yes, that's my understanding. There's some thin slicing of who the exemptions are and that, but yes, I believe it is just the
On the
just the
units
county.
that are affordable or on the whole project?
I believe it is on the affordable units.
So just to be
Project.
clear, that
Yeah.
the county won't be collecting our ad valorem taxes, 100% of it, until the year 2059, if they meet the criteria for affordable on those units.
Yes.
No tax collected for those units. I think that's one of the ones that really is like a punch in the face, because they're still going to be using services, even though they might be affordable units. We won't be collecting any of the taxes for them.
Correct. So that's those provisions. Some changes in the state housing strategy were also included in the bill. There is, again, that statement of intent. I won't read it again at you. And then really a charge for putting in incentives, innovative solutions. This is calling for what the Regional Planning Council in some ways would say is, good community design. You want accessibility, a mix of incomes, maximize your land use and efficiency, promote infill, things like that, accessory dwelling units, things of that nature. They're going to start to restrict state funding for housing to places that have incentives in place, probably, trying to maximize use of the state money. They encourage interlocal agreements and infill and minimizing sprawl. And then, I think this is a good provision that housing available to the state's workforce should prioritize proximity to where the work is. Looking at the total cost of housing, the cost of the unit, whether that be the mortgage payment or the rent, the cost of the transportation, and then how much money you can earn in your job. Those three things together are really what drives affordability of a house or lodging of some kind. trying to preserve housing stock, recognize unique housing needs, so that's, different groups may have particular housing needs, whether that be accessibility or proximity to healthcare, things of that nature. The Schimberg Center at UF is charged with developing statewide data on housing needs. And then OPAGA, which is the audit agency inside the state, is to study program effectiveness in other states and in Florida, and report back annually to the legislature on, is it working, how's it being used, that sort of thing, which obviously is what gets used to tee up changes for the future. Briefly touching on funding, these are all statewide dollars. So obviously 67 counties, everybody doesn't get $150 million. That's divided up across the state. So you have a whole series of different funding amounts here, which are very significant increases over what's been typical. And then I want to mention specifically the Hometown Hero program, which started last year. And that was restricted to first responders, police, fire, those sorts of things, those sorts of careers. Now it is any full-time employee of a Florida-based company with a household income of up to 150% of the state or local median can access down payment assistance starting at $10,000 and going up to $35,000, which is a way to help address an issue that's been cropping up as rents have gone up. The ability to rent, save some money, put a down payment together, and buy a house is precluded when every dollar you have coming in goes towards that rent that keeps going up. So this is a way to help folks achieve that down payment a little easier. And then you can use infrastructure funding from the Job Growth Grant Fund towards infrastructure that supports affordable housing, which is a totally new idea there. And so utilization of this, it's my understanding now this information is, when did I have to give you this presentation? Over a week ago, I guess? So this information is a week-ish old, so my apologies if it's out of date. I don't think it is radically out of date. So is anybody using this? So unincorporated Martin County, it's my understanding that Barron Landings, a.k.a. the Golf World property, may be coming in with an application to utilize this, or they already have. No one has applied in Stewart yet. No one has applied in Indiantown yet, utilizing these provisions. But we do hear rumors of, and I'll put this in quotation marks, threats, where a developer will say, give me what I want, or get out of the way on what I want, or I'm going to bring in one of these Live Local Act projects. I don't know of specific instances, but I've heard about it. I've heard about it in other jurisdictions as well. And then the last thing I want to mention to you all, I mentioned this way at the beginning, and George actually brought it up as well, feedback to the legislature. We have heard consistently from different legislators that they are interested in feedback on implementation of these big ideas. There's a lot of ideas in this bill. And, this is an opportunity to hopefully, address some of the maybe unintended consequences or particular concerns, or get some clarification on some issues that are not as crystal clear. When folks are at the state level and they're writing legislation about how development regulations get applied in a local government, they don't do that every day. And so there are potentially things in there, they may use words or terms of art that mean one thing to us and something else to them. So, there's opportunities hopefully to make some improvements there. And then some other, and this is my opportunity, I guess, to throw in something that I believe in. And the first is I think that industrial land should be removed from the mandatory category. I think there's precious little industrial land. That's where our workplaces are. That's where our development opportunities are, and we really should be very cautious in putting housing into those areas. You can keep it as in the optional approval. There are scenarios that can be imagined where that would be okay, but that's going to be very, very tricky to do, and so we want to have the local zoning authority, local land use and site plan authority there before, mandating it where we're taking land out of the inventory and potentially making it harder for existing industries to do business. People move in next door and they're like, what's all this noise? What's all this smoke? Well, it's been there for 50 years. What's the problem? Well, now somebody lives there. So that's potentially something that I'd like to see the state undertake. Reconsider area median income standard and/or the 120% AMI as quote-unquote affordable. You're getting into market territory there. And then, maybe taking up whatever the four-county task force it comes up with as recommendations. And I think that is my last slide. Is that my last slide?
You have one more.
Oh, that's just the table of incomes if anybody is interested. I already shared the number, so I'll hold that if we need it. So I'm happy to answer any questions to the extent that I can. I have Elise over here to pull me away from the cliff if I start to make
She's good
legal
at that.
opinions. And then, because this wasn't written by the Regional Planning Council, this was written by the state legislature, so I'm doing my best with my experience to try and interpret this for you and highlight some things. There's a few other things I didn't talk about that, have some relevancy, but again, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Mr. Lanahan, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's probably going to do something quarterly as this progresses. Questions from my colleagues? Commissioner Hurd.
Yeah, we do have an application, and that's for Barron Landings, which is a request for 275 units. I don't know how many of those are affordable, presumably more than 70. And I do know that it will be approved administratively, so we don't get to have a public hearing. And I also know that depending upon the conditions, that the affordable units will be tax exempt. So I know that we are not allowed, that we're not going to be the decision makers. However, I think it's imperative that we have a presentation before staff approves any of these live local projects, so that our residents can understand what's being approved, how it's being approved, why it's being approved. There's no prohibition against having a presentation, letting people know what's happening to us, what's being forced upon us.
I made that same suggestion and got an interesting response that unless we don't have the authority to make an applicant do that, there might be no advantage for an applicant to do that if they're not responsible for doing it.
You can have a staff
I was just
presentation.
going to say, the only thing we can do is ask our staff
Sure.
to make an application, a presentation of something, but we can't, it's going to be handled at a different level. So I think it's a brand-new territory for us. I think it's important. I agree with you, Commissioner Hurd, but an applicant would not necessarily have to participate at all if they didn't want to. And
Don't need them.
I was going to say, I can't imagine that they would want to. So you can hear from staff and we can have a little powwow, but that's all it is. It's a little presentation, but better than no presentation. So I had one request to speak for, Mary Gavin.
That was at 9:30 this morning.
You're still here, though. I mean, and I still have it. I mean, I hear your
Good
voice.
morning.
Good morning. Mary Gavin, welcome.
Commissioners and staff, I hope you're all hanging in there. I don't remember what I was going to say, but contrary to popular belief, I don't play pickleball all day and I don't golf. So we do work sometimes, and it would be appreciated if when you do have an agenda change, you would let people know in advance, because I could have gotten a lot done this morning. But anyway, with all that said, just a request. What I really wanted to comment on is I know that this is a new bill. And Ed, I know that you're intimately familiar with the needs for affordable housing in Martin County. I think we all are, quite frankly. And, I think we all have to remember that we have to be willing to give up what we are for what we could become. And there's always going to be a loophole. There's always going to be a way to block it. And I think there are a lot more questions than there are answers at this point. But the bottom line is that there is a severe need for affordable housing in Martin County, and nobody wants it in their backyard. But eventually, we're all going to run into the obstacles of not having anywhere for our teachers or our service workers to live. And then I think we're going to start to lose population. And what I really wanted to share with you is keep in mind the history lesson that we should all be learning from what happened in California back in the 80s. And I have a family East Coast, West Coast rivalry. We haven't shot each other yet, but we think about it occasionally. I have a wonderfully successful brother out in California who can afford what's going on there. And we talk about this frequently because he's very politically involved. And what happened in California in the 80s is very similar to what's happening right now in Florida. And what's happening in Florida is we're having an influx of how many people every day? I don't.
1,100.
1,100 a day it is now. And this is, I mean, almost categorically identical to what happened in California. The other thing that happened in California is that the local commissions and the state they were blocking a lot of the approvals for affordable housing. And if you go back, there are now documents and white papers and so on and so forth that have been written on this. And I believe this is why we now have 102. I'm not saying I'm in love with it, but I believe that the state is trying to avoid becoming California. And I would suggest that you all go back and look at what happened there before you make too many judgments on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Certainly.
Glad you could hang around.
Thank you. It was a great morning.
Luckily, we did those agenda changes so you could see all the different parts.
See them all. But it was great. Honestly, it was.
Thank you. Your time is up. Anybody else like to address us on this topic? Seeing none. I know her, so I could be a little more familiar. It's not like I'm being disrespectful to a stranger. I'm being disrespectful to a friend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's our presentation.
All right, you two, go.
Thank you.
We only have about 27 other items. What I'd like to do is address knock some of the people that are sitting in the room. Just come and tell me your agenda item again. I'm going to do a freestyle. Wait, you thought this morning was freestyle? Wait and you see this. Yes. One more. This is quick. Just tell me the agenda item. Sure. I know what you're here for. I just don't know what the item is called.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ken Delatorre with Design and Entitlement Consultants, and we are agent for the applicant.
What's your agenda item?
DBQJ1 and 2.
Okay.
Thank you.
DBQJ1 and J2. That's how we're going to do these. We're just going to pick people out of the crowd, work front to back. So if you're in the back, you might want to move closer to the front. Knock some of these. I get that there's applicants here with paid professional staff. Our staff, please sit down.
I don't think our staff for that agenda item is here yet. I believe they're
Bring 'em in.
probably on their way.
Okay, they work right over there. They can come in.
So I'm just.
Go ahead. The boss is here.
Ask me some.
Here they come.
There they are.
Okay, I'll announce the item while they're here, and we can go through some of the questions. This next agenda item is DPQJ number 1, request for approval of the Showcase Planned Unit Development Phase 2 Final Site Plan. It'll be presented by Mr. Brian Elam, and it's quasi-judicial, so I will ask my colleagues if they've had any ex parte communications. Commissioner Hurd.
I do, and they've been filed.
Thank you. Commissioner
I
Hetherington.
do, and they've been filed.
I have some, and they've been filed as well. We'll ask Commissioner Jenkins when he comes back. Let the record also show that Commissioner Smith had to depart and will not be here for the rest of the meeting. Anyone that's going to be offering testimony, if you could stand to be sworn in.
Raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Mr. Elam, do you have a copy of the agenda item in your work history?
I do.
Let the record show that it's been submitted. Are there any return receipt requests, return receipt notifications necessary?
Not required.
Thank you. Any interveners?
No interveners.
Thank you. Mr. Elam, I apologize for dropping you right into the hot seat, but we're trying to move the meeting along, and I appreciate your indulgence. You may begin. You are recognized.
Thank you. For the record, Brian Elam.
Speak into the microphone as much as you can, please.
For the record, Brian Elam, Principal Planner with Growth Management. This is a request by Tamarack Land Salerno Reserve LLC for approval of the Phase 2 Final Site Plan for the Showcase PUD. Included with this application is a request for a Certificate of Public Facilities Reservation. The Showcase project received PUD zoning and master site plan approval on July 14th, 2020. The project proposed 2 phases. Phase 1 consists of 79 single-family homes, and Phase 2, 88 two-story townhomes, for a total of 167 residential housing units on approximately 47 acres, for a gross density for the entire project of 3.5 units per acre. The project site is located between Southeast Cove Road and Southeast Salerno Road in Stewart. Phase 2 of the Showcase PUD project includes 88 two-story townhome units and the associated infrastructure on approximately 10 3/4 acres of the total 47.11 acre site. The main access for the Phase 2 is located on the north side of Southeast Cove Road, where Southeast Traybell Circle intersects approximately 4/10 of a mile east of Southwest Canner Highway. Outlined in green is the Phase 2 portion of the project. A development overlay for other proposed projects in the area are shown. Future land use for Phase 2, or for the entire project, is low density. Here's the approved Showcase PUD revised master site plan approved December 2022. And the revised and approved phasing plan approved in December 2021. Phase 1 consists of all the excavation for the project, the construction of the spine road to include driveway connections to Cove and Salerno Road, as well as improvements to Salerno Road and all other improvements required for Phase 1. This application is for the Phase 2 portion, the 88 townhome units in this area here. Development review staff have found the application to be in compliance with all applicable regulations and the comprehensive growth management plan as detailed in the staff report. This application is not required to be heard before the LPA as it has a previously approved master site plan. It only requires 1 public meeting. Staff recommends approval of the Phase 2 final site plan as detailed in the staff report for the Showcase PUD project. We move that the board receive and file the agenda item and its attachments, including the staff report as Exhibit 1, and move that the board approve the Phase 2 final site plan for the Showcase PUD project. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, sir. Very much concise. Questions for Mr. Elam?
I have an observation. He needs to divulge his ex partes.
I know, that was coming up. Commissioner Jenkins, do you have any ex parte communications?
I don't believe I do, but if I do, they've been filed.
Thank you, Commissioner Hurd. Any questions for staff? Applicant's opportunity to make a presentation. Now you get to tell us who you are and why, and where you work.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ken Delatorre with Design Entitlement Consultants, the agent on the applicant, for the applicant Tamarack Land. We just want to take this opportunity to thank staff for their diligent efforts working with our team. They did an excellent presentation, so our team is here to answer any questions you may have, so in an effort not to be redundant with their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the applicant? Seeing none. Anyone from the public looking to address us on this specific item? Also seeing none, comes back to the board.
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Heatherington, seconded by Commissioner Hurd for staff's recommendation. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Smith absent. While you're staying in that seat, the next portion of this, the sister or the companion item, is DPQJ-2, request plat approval for the Showcase Plan Unit Development Phase 2, C140-013. We have to do the whole thing again. Commissioner Hurd, do you have any ex parte communications?
I do, and they've been filed.
Thank you. Commissioner Jenkins?
If I do, they've been filed.
Thank you. Commissioner Heatherington?
I do, and they've been filed.
I also have them, and they've been filed. Anyone that's going to be offering testimony, please stand to be sworn in.
Raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Any interveners?
No interveners.
Do you have a copy of your work history and the agenda item?
You for Exhibit 1.
Thank you very much. You are still recognized.
Thank you. This is a request by Tamarack Lands Salerno Reserve LLC for approval of the Phase 2 plat for the Showcase PUD. Included with this application is a request for a certificate of public facilities exemption. Showcase PUD received master site plan approval on July 14th, 2020. The Phase 2 final site plan was just heard before this board in the previous agenda item and approved 4-0. Development is located between Southeast Cove Road and Southeast Salerno Road in Stewart, with the main entrance for Phase 2 located 0.4 of a mile east of Southwest Canada Highway on the north side of Southeast Cove Road. Phase 2 plat is consistent with the Phase 2 final site plan, which is an 88-lot residential subdivision consisting of 16 buildings. The approximate area of the Phase 2 plat is 10.75 acres. Development review staff has found the application to be in compliance with all applicable regulations and the comprehensive growth management plan as detailed in the staff report. Review is not required by the LPA as it has a previously approved master site plan. It only requires one public meeting. Staff recommends approval of the Phase 2 plat as detailed in the staff report for the Showcase PUD project. We move that the board receive and file the agenda item and its attachments, including the staff report as Exhibit 1, and move that the board approve the Phase 2 plat for the Showcase PUD project, including the contract for construction of required improvements and infrastructure. And that concludes the presentation.
Appreciate that very much. Questions from commissioners for staff? Seeing none. Applicant, presentation. Just come and say that you don't have one, please. He shook his head no.
Again, Ken Delatorre for the record, no presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant and his compelling presentation? Seeing none. Any members of the public looking to address us on this? Also seeing none, we are back to the board.
Move staff's recommendation.
Second.
Thank you very much. It's like a deja vu. We have a motion by Commissioner Heatherington for staff's recommendation. Could fail, stay right there. Could be a tie, which in tie is a no. We have a motion by Commissioner Heatherington for staff's recommendation, seconded by Commissioner Hurd. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Smith. Now you may depart. We're now going to take public hearing number 3. Legislative public hearing to consider adoption of Comprehensive Plan Amendment CPA 22-04 Manatee Southwest Prong STA. It was supposed to be presented by Miss Daphne Schwab, but she's not feeling well, so it'll be presented by pinch hitter Clyde Doolin. Mr. Doolin, welcome. Thanks for sitting in.
Thank you, members of the board. For the record, I am Clyde Doolin, the Comprehensive Planning Administrator. This is a proposed comprehensive plan amendment that was initiated by the board, so the staff presentation will be the applicant presentation as well. This is a small-scale future land use map amendment, a very small-scale future land use map amendment. It involves 0.99 acres that currently has the CRA neighborhood future land use designation, and it involves another 0.99 acres approximately that is a right-of-way that was abandoned by the Board of County Commissioners in the Port Salerno Community Redevelopment Area. I'll go to the map quickly to show you where we are. This is Cove Road, the yellow line. The railroad tracks and Dixie Highway are to the east, and this is Driftwood Avenue to the west. The areas outlined in red on this map are right-of-way, and this spot, and this spot are the 3 parcels that have the CRA neighborhood future land use designation currently. The proposed amendment changes the 3 parcels with the CRA neighborhood to CRA Center, and the abandoned right-of-way would also receive the CRA Center future land use designation with this proposed amendment. The local planning agency heard this amendment and voted 3-0 to recommend approval. Staff recommends approval, and with that, I will show you the actual change on the map. So to visualize it, this parcel, and this parcel have the CRA neighborhood currently. They are separated from the other CRA neighborhood properties by right-of-way. They're proposed to have the same color of, I guess you could say, pink that's on they're represented by CRA Center. And this areas that are outlined in red, that are right-of-way, that have been abandoned and are surrounded by the same property owner, would also receive the CRA Center future land use, and the proposed land use change would look as it does here where my cursor is. And with that, I'll cease the staff presentation. Staff recommends approval of this proposed future land use map amendment. The advertisements have been made in the newspaper, letters to the surrounding property owners have been made, and signs posted. This is a small-scale amendment. This is the final action.
Thank you. Ms. Corus, anything to add?
This CRA is supportive.
Duly noted. Questions for Mr. Doolin? Seeing none, anyone from the public looking to address us on this topic? Also seeing none, back to the board.
Move staff's recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Hurd for staff's recommendation, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Smith absent. Following up, the sister agenda item is a public hearing quasi-judicial number 1. Public hearing to consider adoption of an ordinance amending Article 12, Redevelopment Code, Division 6, Port Salerno Community Redevelopment Code, Land Development Regulations, Martin County Code, CPA 22-04, Manatee Southwest Prong, STA. It'll be again presented by Mr. Doolin. If you have any ex parte communications, Commissioner Hurd.
I don't have any, and they've been filed.
Thank you. Commissioner Jenkins.
I don't think I have any, but if I do, they've been filed.
Thank you. Commissioner Heatherington.
If any, they've been filed.
Mine as well. I don't believe I have any, but we've filed that. If you're going to be offering testimony in this case, in this agenda item, please stand to be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Do you have a copy of the work history and the agenda item?
I do. Thank you.
No one's intervening, I would assume?
No interveners?
Correct.
And no return receipts are necessary? Or are they?
No, they are.
No,
They were turned in the LPA, I believe.
that's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Doolin, please continue.
The same piece of property as you discussed or considered in the past hearing is the subject of this proposed change to the land development regulations, and specifically to an exhibit of the land development regulations that shows the zoning subdistricts that are being proposed for change. The changes are from allow me to go to the right page. 301. This is the exhibit PS2 of the regulating plan that's proposed for amendment, and as you can see, the area circled is the same area that we were just talking about. Let's go to 302. And the proposed change is from the detached subdistrict to the corridor subdistrict on the same properties that we were just looking at. The major difference is the number of units per acre that's permitted. Instead of 10, it would be 15 units per acre. The corridor subdistrict implements the CRA Center future land use designation that the board just voted on. I don't think I need to go into further detail except to say the staff recommends approval, and the local planning agency also recommended approval.
Thank you. And you, as the applicant?
Would ask the board to approve this proposed amendment to the land development regulations.
You agree with staff?
We do.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant or staff? Seeing none? I was going to ask you to switch seats, go to the podium, but anyone from the public looking to address us on this topic? Seeing none. Back to the board.
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Heatherington for staff's recommendation, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Smith absent. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
both of you. Appreciate it. Our next agenda item is public hearing quasi-judicial number 2. Public hearing to consider an amendment to the Martin County zoning atlas to change the zoning district classification for the Maureen T. Atkin LE property from A2 agricultural to AR5A agricultural ranchette A084-001. It'll be presented by Ms. Allison Rozek. And it is quasi-judicial, so let me ask again, Commissioner Heatherington, do you have any ex parte communications?
If any, they've been filed.
Thank you. Commissioner Jenkins?
If any, they've been filed.
Commissioner Hurd?
I don't have any, and they've been filed.
I don't have any, and they've been filed. Anyone that's going to be offering testimony, please stand to be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You have your work history and a copy of the agenda item.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any interveners?
No interveners.
Are there any need for return receipts?
Yes, and I believe they've been turned in.
At the
They've been turned in at the LPA.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rozek, you are recognized. Please begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman, County Board Commissioners. I'm Allison Rozek, Principal Planner in the Growth Management Department. A copy of the agenda item, my work history, has been submitted for the file. The owner of the property today for the rezoning is Maureen T. Aikens, LE, and the agent is Fox McCluskey Bush Robinson, whose representative Tyson Waters is here today with us. The 19.73 acres is located at 11301 Southwest Fox Brown Road, just east of Southwest Fox Brown Road, in close proximity to Indiantown. The site's current future land use designation is agricultural ranchette. The comp plan specifies a density of 1 unit per 5 gross acres shall be permitted within the areas designated with an agricultural ranchette future land use. The property is currently zoned A2 agricultural, which is an old zoning category inconsistent with its land use, making this mandatory rezoning. The request is to rezone to AR5A agricultural ranchette, allowing 1 residential unit per 5 acres. There are 2 standard zoning districts that are available for you to implement the ag ranchette land use, AR5A and AR10A. There is an additional option of a planned unit development. The 2 agricultural ranchette zoning districts permit the same exact uses except for one. Fishing and hunting camps are not allowed in AR10A, but are in AR5. But it's important to note that without a rezoning today, fishing and hunting camps have already and continue to be allowed under the property's current zoning classification. The development standards are the same in both the AR5A and AR10A district, except that the AR5 allows 1 unit per 5 acres, whereas AR10 allows 1 per 10 acres. The Martin County Comp Plan requires certain factors be considered. We considered these factors and concluded that AR5A is consistent with our plan and all our regulations. The density is consistent and provides an appropriate transition between the small farms and single-family homes adjacent to the site and Indiantown's clustered development pattern in close proximity. Staff found the proposed rezoning complies with the comprehensive plan and that the certificate of public facilities exemption is appropriate for this zoning change. The local planning agency required public hearing was held on July 20th, and the LPA considered the matter, recommended the board approve the rezoning request. Staff is recommending that the board move to receive and file the agenda item and its attachments, including the staff report as Exhibit 1, and a move to adopt the resolution to change the zoning district classification for the Maureen T. Aikens LE property from A2 agricultural to AR-5A agricultural ranchette, including a certificate of public facilities exemption. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Rozek? Seeing none. Applicant's opportunity to make a presentation.
Tyson Waters from the law firm of Fox McCluskey here on behalf of the applicant, and we agree with the staff's recommendation, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions for the applicant's representative? Seeing none at this time. Anyone from the public looking to address us here? Commissioner Jenkins.
Move to approve staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Jenkins to accept staff's recommendation of approval, seconded by Commissioner Heatherington. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Smith absent. What we're going to do is take a 10-minute break for closed captioning, and we will be back at 3:50. And what we're going to do, Mr. Doherty, are your members of law enforcement? They're gone, correct? So you'll have to wait. We're going to take departmental number 6. when we come back.
Thank you.
I'm just saying. We are back from our mid-afternoon break for closed captioning. It is still August 8th, 2023. We're going to take up agenda item departmental number 6, commercial and industrial land use analysis. It'll be presented in tandem, but I will be introducing Miss Samantha Lovelady.
Good afternoon, Board. Samantha Lovelady with Martin County Growth Management for the record. The purpose of this land use analysis is to determine the developed and vacant acreage of commercial and industrial lands in Martin County. According to Goal 4.10 and Goal 4.11 of the Comprehensive Plan, the county must provide for adequate and appropriate sites for commercial and industrial uses. This report updates the county's 2016 report with new information regarding commercial and industrial future land use designation to achieve these goals. The prior report focused only on unincorporated portion of Martin County. For this report, the incorporated areas are included in the analysis to provide an overview of where the developed and vacant commercial industrial lands exist. The report is made up of 3 parts. Part 1 is the amount of acreage developed as commercial or industrial uses by jurisdiction. Part 2 is the inventory of vacant commercial and industrial parcels. And Part 3 is an analysis to help guide the county's land use balance of commercial and industrial land necessary to accommodate the projected population. Staff is recommending that the board approve the study. In doing so, the study can be used as data analysis for the evaluation approval report process, which is required by state statute. And with that, I'd like to introduce David Farmer, and he is a consultant with Metro Forecasting Models, and he is the author of this study.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Again, for the record, my name is David Farmer with Metro Forecasting Models. May I proceed?
Yes, please, you are recognized.
So our firm, Metro Forecasting, only works for local governments to study long-range planning and land use issues. My background is professional engineering and planning, as well as I have a master's in public administration with an emphasis focus on policies that lead to fiscal neutrality. My partner, Dr. Paul Van Buskirk, invented the interactive growth model, which is the backbone of the majority of the work that we do. We'll skip that one. So as Ms. Lovelady was saying, the purpose of this was to update the 2016 study and this time look at all of the incorporated areas as well as the unincorporated to get more of a full picture. It was created with Martin County parcel data, and we analyzed it spatially and looked at aerial photos and even satellite imagery to help understand what's developed and what's not. So Table 1, diving right into the report, it's interesting to point out that in January of this year, there was almost 18 million square feet of developed commercial space in Martin County. What's also interesting, I think, is that with Stewart's population is only about 10% of the county, they have 38% of the supply. And that was when we first started studying it back in 2019, 2020. We thought it was very interesting that Stewart has such a concentration of commercial. And after looking at the surrounding area, it became sort of obvious or apparent that a lot of places, a lot of people outside of Stewart actually get their needs met in Stewart. We think over time that actually might change as the population grows around the outside of Stewart and can support more commercial space. So we looked at your future land use designations for a commercial and industrial, and these parcels had to be served or adjacent to water and sewer services, and not located on any road segments that had concurrency constraints. So unincorporated Martin County comprises about 57% of all of the vacant commercial acreage. And here you can see in Table 3, there's a breakdown of that. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that table. Something different that we did from the 2016 report is that we recognized, and this is, unfortunately, it's before the Live Local Act, and so we were dealing with before that period of time. We designated some of the commercial zonings allow either residential or commercial uses. And so in those cases, we actually took some of the land and said, well, some of that land invariably is going to be used as residential. So let's back that out so we don't overstate the amount of vacant lands, right? So that's the purpose of that. Certainly all this land could have been developed commercially, but certainly a portion of it could also have been developed residentially. So we're trying to be conservative in the approach, if you will. those parcels that had a Category C zoning were deemed not to, at the time, not to allow any residential development, and so we didn't assign any residential development to that. Next thing we looked at was, in aggregate, aggregate information is very interesting, but what's more interesting is when we break it down by size, right? So now we can say how many acres are in total, but how many are more than 5 acres? So if you have that really important employer that comes to town or some business you want to attract, it's important to know how many large parcels you have so that how many people can you accommodate that come to that table. Like real quick example from Collier County is Uline, the office equipment maker, came to Collier County. Collier County doesn't have a huge demand for office supplies. It just happens to be a nice strategic location, much like Martin County. And they chewed up 65 acres with 915,000 square feet in one fell swoop. If Collier County didn't have that land, Uline would not have existed inside of Collier County. So I want you to keep those kinds of things in mind. When we look at future commercial acreage, and we're looking at trying to estimate, forecast what the need might be, one way to do it is to look at a population basis. And so we used Bieber and looked over the next 15 years and found that the general population growth, according to Bieber, was about 10%. And you can read the table for yourself. In the end, if we use a population approach, it means we need about another 124 acres. The good news is you have about 549 in the unincorporated county. So from that standpoint, you have a multiple of these 15-year periods of commercial property. Any questions? Now switching gears to industrial lands. So Martin County has developed about over 1.2 million square feet since 2020. That's just very interesting, I think. Again, Stewart has only 10% of the population of the county, but it has 11% of the industrial space. Indiantown has 22%. Thought that was interesting. And by the way, that 22%, we segregated FPL and pulled them out because they're the 600-pound gorilla. They're going to skew any data. So we pulled them out, not to try to obscure anything, but just so that we didn't want them in there to skew the data in a certain direction. Again, looking now at the vacant lands, so we see that Martin County overall has about 3,600 acres, and that's interesting, but we want to be honest, and so we also looked at the uplands, right? Taking out the wetlands, you still have over 3,000 acres of vacant industrial land in Martin County. Again, looking at the parcel sizes to know where you can accommodate things. Unincorporated Martin County has 28 parcels that are more than 5 acres, and those 28 parcels comprise over 1,500 acres. We see also Indiantown has quite a selection of 19 parcels over 5 acres, totaling 1,803. Again, if we take a population approach, we find that another 108 acres would be needed over the next 15 years, using, again, just the metric of the unincorporated vacant industrial lands. That's 1,500. It shows that you have more than enough. Population isn't the only approach you can take. You could also take absorption over the last few years. We covered that in the report as well, and that can provide some different analysis as well. So as the county continues to grow, it's going to be necessary to have reliable data on your population growth and your industrial needs. We feel that you should be looking at updating this thing, especially with the Live Local Act, probably on the order of at least every 2 years, just to keep your finger on the pulse, because now we can see these other lands can be appropriated for uses that weren't contemplated when this study was initiated. We also would like to point out some very minor but nerdy changes between the 2016 report and this report. When we're doing the very detailed GIS analysis, we noticed a particular issue in the parcel data that's in GIS terms, it's called stacking. And what that meant, if you read the report, is that if you have, say, a 1 acre condominium development and you have 10 units in that condominium, then every one of those units reports 1 acre. So if you add all the acres from those 10 condominiums, you get 10 acres, but they're really sitting on 1 acre in total. We were able to pull that out, clean that front, and so now you have the real essence of what's been developed in Martin County. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. Questions for Mr. Farmer or Ms. Lovelady? We have 2 requests to speak forms. The first one is Mr. Ted Astolfi from the Economic Council.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Ted Astolfi, CEO of the Economic Council. I just first of all want to thank staff for giving the opportunity to comment on the plan and the study, give some input, and for listening to us. And Mr. Farmer, you as well. Appreciate that. You know, as Mr. Farmer pointed out, this is very population-driven. And I had some exceptions to that. And I think when you get to the conclusion, and it is a valid way to do it, don't get me wrong, there are multiple ways to do this. And when you look at history, it really did match up with population growth as far as the demand for commercial industrial. But as we move forward, and we're seeing new product come online and seeing increased demand, it does change a little bit. And we want to be, in my opinion, more like Collier County, have some property available for those contributory businesses like Uline that don't sell in the community, but actually bring money in from their sales outside Martin County into our community. So that's where we're kind of looking at the forward looking. So I do really appreciate the changes that were made from the first edition and the conclusions that were made, recognizing all the different factors that are in play here, particularly Senate Bill 102. So I just wanted to say that. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Our next request to speak form is Ms. Joan Goodrich with the BDB.
And she's not here, so she's asked me to speak for her.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much.
So, so I'll do my preemptive statement that I'm
But
representing.
we're not going to allow that,
Okay, good.
because then everyone's going to want that.
Fine.
You can just.
I'll let her submit her
Let me
comments.
ask you a question. If you were going to say something else, what would it be?
So Joan just wanted to point out that there are more demand-driven factors going into this. She's seeing a lot of demand for about 4 million square feet of industrial space. It's more of an opportunity analysis that she did. And she makes a comment that based on their commercial real estate statistics, she's showing a 3.2% vacancy rate in office space right now, so we don't have a ton of office space available. And the industrial space is about 2.5% vacancy rate. So we have very low occupant vacancy rates in those two uses right now. So those were her key points.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You did a better job representing her than yourself. Commissioner Hurd, wait, before you go, Joan, 1 second.
No, this is a question for Mr. Farmer.
Oh, never mind.
Where is Ag Tech in here?
It's not called
It's
ag.
1,700 acres of,
I will show you. So if you look over here, you have, right to the right of the north arrow, there, this is vacant commercial. So Ag Tech has 200 acres of commercial. And then if you look at the industrial, there's 700 acres of industrial. So it's split up.
I thought it was 1,700 acres.
It is, there's also
That's
817 acres that have to be agricultural. So you've got the 200 of commercial, 700 of industrial, and 817 for agriculture.
How do you do that? It all has the same future land use.
It's a requirement in the ag tech policies in the comp plan.
Okay, so only 900 is available for commercial or industrial development?
That's correct.
Right, so staff sent me the approval, and I went through and I dissected the various pieces of it. And so there's about, my recollection is about 200 acres for, I think there's a hotel included and some other ancillary commercial. And then there's the absolute industrial and then the absolute ag. And so how could I call ag industrial? So I pulled that out. And while it's ag tech, if you have an actual commercial entitlement, I said, well, that actually goes over in the commercial category. And that way we get down to just the net of the available industrial.
I didn't remember that we gave 3 different land uses on the parcel.
Yeah, it's one future land use, but as
Yeah,
part
so
of that,
this isn't making a bit of sense to me.
it's the 3 different uses, which would be industrial uses, commercial uses, and then agricultural uses. Those were laid out in the policies that were adopted.
Okay.
So it's nice and simple, it's included. It's in there.
Well, some of it is.
Well, the agricultural's not, but the rest of it's in there.
Yeah, if you look at this piece, the commercial is on 714, and then the industrial is on top of that
Okay.
to the north.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
Anyone else? Anyone from the public other than the 2 speakers already? Seeing none. I would entertain a motion to approve this presentation.
I'll make a motion to approve this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Jenkins to approve this presentation, seconded by Commissioner Heatherington. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Smith absent.
Thank you,
Now,
Commissioners.
my pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Thank you very much for your efforts to help us and safe travels home.
Pleasure, thank you.
We're going to take our 10:45 a.m. preset derelict vessel presentation. Mr. Tardy, good morning. I shouldn't do that because then people that are following at home are going to think they had the fast forwarding on their DVR. It is officially 4:08. We appreciate your patience.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Darty with the Building Department. I have with me Dave Calando, who's coming in here, and this is a presentation that the board requested for information on the derelict vessel program. We did have a couple deputies, but they had to leave, but we have the information, and we'll follow up with any questions you may have. In the presentation, you'll see several pictures. These are actual real pictures of cases in Martin County. These are not stock photos. And at the end of the presentation, Dave will go into some specific examples, and then certainly we'll be answering any questions you have. The overall objective of the derelict vessel is obviously to keep our waterways safe, navigable, no damage to the environment, and a better quality of life maintained by Martin County. The program is predominantly driven by the legislatures, statutes associated with law enforcement. So unlike code enforcement, we have our own ordinances. These are actually state ones that we follow through, and the sheriff or law enforcement takes the lead. Just an overview, the program has one FTE, which is Dave here. A typical case takes 30 days. Building department had to transfer it over in late 2015. From then, we've had about 221 derelict cases, and a little bit under half we bring into compliance. The other end up being destroyed and disposed of. And our most common vessel is about a 30-foot fiberglass hull vessel. What actually is a derelict vessel is defined in Statute 823, and where it defines it as wrecked, junked, or substantially dismantled, the statute goes on to really describe those three words in a lot more detail than we were going to put here. But two other areas that are really not as thoughtful in your mind as derelict is you could have a very, very good shaped vessel, but it is docked or moored at a location that the owner did not approve that mooring. So it's considered derelict by not having permission to moor there. Nothing to do with the status or the shape of the boat, condition of the boat. Same as if a boat got washed up on someone else's property or grounded or beached somewhere. It becomes derelict only because of the location, not necessarily because of the status of the boat. These are out of the statute. There's another statute that has enabled law enforcement to a little bit more is a vessel at risk. And that's where they see a vessel that may become derelict. We want to take action ahead of time, preempt it from becoming derelict. And you can see here several areas that aren't quite there yet, but it allows law enforcement to take action. They can actually have a boat moored very closely to some island that really needs to be moved. They have the authority to move it without asking the owner and re-anchor it or those types of things. So vessels that aren't quite taking on water and disposing of it, the pump may be bad or propulsion. So that's defined in that vessel. The actual enforcement, this is directly out of a different statute, 327. We're going to have 4 or 5 statutes. It talks about, Fish and Wildlife being in charge, but the reality you get down to it, it says any law enforcement officer may enforce these rules. In Martin County, the sheriff takes that lead. There is a process to follow. Again, another statute. Law enforcement identifies a vessel as derelict. It is tagged as a derelict, and they make the effort to contact the owner. That is all on law enforcement. During the process, Dave will go out and locate that tagged vessel so that we can prepare for our part if it does get through the full process. The 21 days notice is when it's tagged. Nothing can be done for 21 days. That's a copy of the notice we put on, the statutory requirement. We update, one's being updated now for the proper information associated with any changes to the statute. It goes in the information where the boat is and who to contact and all those things. And you can see here's a typical boat that has been tagged. It will stay there 21 days, and afterwards, the sheriff will make a determination that it's run a full 21-day process of the tagging and notification. And then they will let us know if there's no response in the 21 days, then we will, as an agent, remove the vessel and destroy it, or the second option is to be used in an artificial reef program. Many of these would not be appropriate. First of all, you're not allowed to use, I think, a fiberglass hull in an artificial reef. Our majority are fiberglass hulls, so it's really not an option. Don't confuse this with abandoned property that gives you a lot more options. This is specific for derelict vessels. The next steps is once the sheriff does go through the 21-day notice process, tries to notify the owner does not ask for a hearing or anything of that nature, they will say they've concluded the investigation. The attorney for the sheriff sends us a letter, examples as you see there, and we at that point arrange for the removal and the destruction of that vessel through our continuing services contractors. How do we pay for this and fund this? Ordinance 756 has a local option that registers vessels, and a small portion of that is put towards this program. We regularly apply for grants from the Florida Inland Navigation District and get grants there. We have received a private grant before, Jupiter Narrows. They wanted their waterway areas clean and sent us some money to help do that. You potentially could have restitution through the judicial system. We typically do not have that success because many of the people with derelict vessels do not have any assets. In larger ones, the federal government will come in the Federal Pollution Program, and Endeavor is one of the vessels that had that. We'll have some pictures later, and Dave can explain that. And the Fish and Wildlife Commission has actually engaged us in some activity associated with this and helped out. But by and large, it's a local thing till you get into larger ones. At this point, I'll let Dave explain these and what they were and that type of thing, and be ready to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a vessel that was out at Pendarvis Park Cove area there in Palm City, sailboat, and it went through the process. The only thing that could be tagged was the actual mast, and a lot of times on sailboats when they hit bottom, they still have a mast. If they have a mast, that's still sticking out. Our vendor removed it, and that's just a picture of it being removed. What they do when they remove it, they'll go through and they'll make sure any hazardous materials out of it, batteries, fuels, oils, paints, anything that the landfill won't accept. And they'll cut the keel off, and then they'll trailer it out there. They'll trailer it out to the landfill where it'll be destroyed. This is actually recent fire damaged boats. We had 3 of them over at the Harborage in the city of Stewart at that marina. There was 2 45-foot sport fishermen and a 38-foot sailboat. And even though I observed this, our vendor was involved, and they were able to remove all 3 vessels. They were all sunk because of the water that was put on them. They were burnt down to the gunnels during the fire, but they raised them all and had them all out of there in 6 days and hauled them back to their yard. This vessel is the Endeavor. This occurred in 2015. I think this was my 4th case after coming over from the sheriff's office. And this was a cargo relief vessel that was going to go to Haiti. And it was way overloaded. And it went down in the crossroads. It had bags of rice, beans, clothing, and 55-gallon drums of diesel. Everything got contaminated. The Coast Guard had come in and removed the 4 Haitians nationals from the vessel. They took over the project, and I worked with FWC on this. The the Coast Guard brought in, they started tapping into the Federal Pollution Fund. And they brought in some big outfits like Titan Group and SWS. They had to remove and decargo all the hazardous cargo. They used Sansprit Park as an offload site and then trucked it all away. We got involved in this vessel after they had it raised and towed to American Custom Yachts, and then we took it over and Martin County did the destruction on it. The federal government paid out of their federal pollution fund, $600,000 is what they were charged, and what they took out of their fund to remove it. And we paid $25,000 to destroy it, which reimbursed us for that amount on that specific vessel. This is the largest vessel Martin County has ever removed, and it was actually a barge. And FWC, the state FWC DV coordinator, Phil Horning, contacted me from Tallahassee and said they would pay 75% of the cost. Background on this thing was after the 04-05 hurricanes, we had a contractor come up from Hollywood to remove pilings. They had a crane on it at one time. After they pulled out, they left the barge. They took the crane off. They left the barge there, and over time, it sank. This was in 2017, and the state, through their grant program, was going to pay 75% also, and we were going to pay this 25%. We had to put it out. Our contractor couldn't do it, so we put it out for specific bid and brought in a big outfit called TSI, and it was 3/4 submerged. It weighed over 400,000 pounds with silt and mud and everything else. It was 90-foot barge. They brought in track hoe after track hoe, big 110,000-pound machines, and using tow cables that they kept breaking until they finally were able to break it loose, the suction, and they pulled it to the shoreline, and then they used a track hoe from the back, and they held it in place, and they just chopped it up. And then they shredded it all up put it on the property. That property is owned by Martin County underneath the Arundel Bridge, and then the contractor cleaned it all up after they did this removal. The metal scrap went out to Indiantown Scrapyard.
I would add too, the sheriff, when you look at our statistics, which we had earlier, the sheriff will tag a number of vessels that may be considered derelict vessels at risk. They actually don't get to us if they come into compliance before they switch from derelict vessel at risk to an actual derelict vessel. So that's kind of the difference. One of the major things I think makes our program very successful is Dave, having been in law enforcement, works hand in hand because they go out and tag boats together. They get longitude and latitude on it so that when we actually have to pull the vessel, at that time, the contractor knows where the vessel is, we know the status, and we're ready to go immediately. And one additional thing, Fine called us the other day for the Florida Inland Navigation District and saw the presentation and the agenda and asked that we come to their board meetings in September on Hutchinson Island and make the presentation because they felt it really outlined the program well, and we actually have one of the most successful of the 12 counties in their jurisdiction. With that, we'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, both of you. Questions for staff? Mr. Donaldson. Mike.
Just going to echo Jeff's comments in that we're really proud that Martin County has a really good derelict vessel program. There's a lot of counties that struggle with this, and one of the key areas is how you actually go through that process of tagging and working with law enforcement. That's such a critical partnership with the Sheriff's Department to make it happen, and we've been doing it for a long time. Dave's been doing a great job, so I just wanted to congratulate you all and continuing to be really a model in the state for derelict vessel removal, so thank you.
Great job. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I know that in the other code enforcements, Mr. Colando, that you've been doing, your name comes up quite a bit, and I appreciate your professionalism and how you I think it's one of the hardest jobs that county employees do because you have no idea what you're showing up at, So your background in law enforcement is probably helpful, but code enforcement is a very challenging job. It's a very dangerous job, so I appreciate what you've done.
Thank you.
So thank you. Mr. Doherty, you're staying, correct, for a code enforcement presentation, departmental. Oh, see, change seats. Speaking of code enforcement, presentations, departmental number 4.
With me changing chairs is now John Colando. This is an overview of code enforcement.
Another name I hear quite a bit, so good for you. Two of you.
And hopefully good. One of the main differences is in code enforcement, we're enforcing more ordinances that the county has established as opposed to derelict vessel, which is what the state has established. So that's probably the main difference. Day one, we're more involved in this. Again, we'll go through this, and John will look at some pictures at the end and give you the same kind of analysis that Dave did. Our objective is to get everyone educated and in compliance with our codes and rules to make the best environment we have for the citizens of the county. Many of the common complaints are the normal high grass, broken windows, abandoned vehicles, and damaged fences and those types of things. Some we do, some we do not. We'll get into that a little bit more. The actual chapter of the Florida statutes is 162 that outlines the procedures. That's just the processes. The actual enforcement, whether it be grass or what have you, we set through our ordinances. One thing particular is how do we go before a hearing? They give you three options with a local enforcement board, a special magistrate, or actual civil action through the court system. Martin County historically did have an enforcement board. They switched over to the magistrate 10 so years ago. And so that's where we are today with special magistrate. The chapter establishes, the timelines and the fees and those types of things, and allows for foreclosure and some money judgments and those type of legal things. We don't generally go that direction, but we try to enforce everything we can and bring it into compliance. How are our cases open? We are open to any kind of contact. We often have them come in through the request for service online. We'll get those numbers in a little bit. We can get calls in from the public or calls in internal. Some employee can be somewhere and say, hey, I saw this. But most common is our inspectors are out inspecting and they see code enforcements themselves, either doing neighborhood enforcements or looking at expired permits or whatever, and run into similar situations in whatever neighborhood they are in. Pathways to connect, this is just where if we get the request for service online, they go online and they can connect through two different ways, a request for service, or go to the building department and click through to code enforcement, and always the phone call. A lot of issues has come up, questions about complaints, anonymous complaints, no anonymous complaints. It's in the statute specifically that we cannot act on an anonymous complaint except in an imminent destruction of some habitat-sensitive resources or threat to public health, those types of things. Oddly enough, it's in 162.06, and then in 162.21, it's the exact same verbiage. I don't know why, but it is in there twice in two different areas of the same statute about the anonymous complaints. One thing that was in the original bill that said they wanted anonymous if people felt threatened or retaliation from the person they complained about, that was removed from the bill, so we cannot use that. How's the process go? First inspection, code enforcement has 5 days to get out and respond. They make every attempt to talk or meet with the occupant of the property. Many times the occupant is not the owner of the property, so we got to discern who's responsible for what, let them know. No one there, we stick a door tag on, and notice of a visit. This is the type of form of the information we leave so that people can call and get in contact with us to see what the issue is. Once there is a violation, code enforcement will research the owner. We have two options: use the tax collector's information or the property appraisers. We choose the property appraiser's website. If we have a notice of violation, it's mailed to the property owner and allows for reasonable time to correct the violation. What actually is reasonable time, statute calls for 30 days. Exceptions can be to that for those couple reasons there: repeat violation, health, emergency, irreparable, reversible harm. This is a type of letter we send out, notice of violation. It's not crystal clear because we didn't want to call anyone out, just give you an example of what we do. If they come to a thing, they get due process as in any hearing. They get notice of the hearing. They get an opportunity to be heard. And then, of course, they go before a magistrate to be the judge of the matter. A notice to appear is given to them. If there is an issue to appear, it's sent out certified mail. If it is not, return receipt. We post it on the property as well as here at this building. We have the option of here or the courthouse. We find it better here because we are here for the hearings, and the courthouse really not many people go to and get in and out, and so it's better here. This is just another sample of a notice that gets sent out. Again, it's just to let you know that we do, in a formal manner, adhere to that. The hearing itself is a quasi-judicial. Burden of proof resides on us. There's fees associated with the process. The fines are set through statute, maximums, what they can be per day, per violation, and those types of things. Ultimately, the special magistrate that we hire sets the order and the compliance date for what needs to happen. If it's out of compliance, the fine starts to tick. Once it's in compliance, a lien is placed on the property until the fine is actually paid. After 20 years, if it is not paid, it goes away by statute. However, the county can go through the judicial process and enforce it through civil action. However, you cannot do that against a homesteaded property. Each of the people that are found to be out of compliance and have a lien have the option to come before this board and ask for a lien reduction, and the county board can do it at a regularly scheduled meeting as they see appropriate. Other issues that we kind of get phone calls for that we don't regulate: septic tanks, historically trees on the roads and sidewalks. However, we recently modified our ordinance in the last month to work jointly with Public Works to eliminate the overlap. We get loud noises Saturday night, what have you. That's the sheriff, car tags, or obviously the tax collector. They specifically in the statute say this does not pertain to enforcement of the Florida Building Code because that has requirements such as they have to get a permit, which is not a local ordinance, it's a state statute. So there is some differentiation for how far we go. Some statistics for last year, you can see how many requests for service that would be coming in through the computer. We had almost 5,000 code enforcement actions. It's about 823 per investigator, so they are very busy. We've had 63 compliance orders through the magistrate, 30 fine reductions coming for the board. Typically, at 10% of the face value is what is sought and received. We have 4,100 code enforcement lien searches. When someone buys a property, they ask for a title work from the title company to issue the title insurance. They will in turn ask us for a code enforcement. Are there any on the property? We had 4,100 requests so last year. In a busy real estate market, transferring back and forth, we'll continue to get them. So that does take some time. And we had 10 unsafe structures. If we look here now, John can take over some of these actual live, not live, but real cases.
Good afternoon. This was a property off of Locks Road. The guy had a double-wide trailer. He tore out half of it during the hurricane season and then started to rebuild it without a permit. So we obviously asked him to either permit it or remove. That was a long battle with him on that.
Looks like legitimate construction.
Yeah. He thought so. And the sad thing is during this time, he had kids in the house during hurricane season. So it did get removed. If I think we have, nope.
Well, that's it.
That was, yes, on the right, I'm sorry. The second one, this was a shed that somebody decided to turn into living space. And obviously it caught fire. And that was a county removal. We went in and removed that one and left it like that. This was one prior to me. However, it was a hoarding house, and it was off of Green, or it was Mr. Green off a boat ramp, sorry. And we removed, I believe, 7 cars and 2 trailers beyond all the other stuff, and I believe the bill on that one was like $11,000 for the removal, and that's how we left it afterwards. And this was a nice rehab property. That was the back end of the property where the pool was. There was actually a raccoon living inside who moved out because it was so bad, but the human stayed. This one was kind of neat because we buy ugly houses they came in and they rehabbed the property. If Martin County would have demoed that property, it would have been a vacant lot, and then most likely people would have just been dumping there. So the rehab on there, I think, was definitely worth it. Now you have people that, you know, bought the property and are taking care of it. I think it was a better option.
With that, be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Questions? Mr. Colondo, how long have you been doing this?
Well, I've been here in Martin County for 8 years. I also worked for Port St. Lucie. I was there for 10 years.
So 18 years. Full head of hair when you started.
Like Fabio.
Yeah. I bet, well, it's a challenging job. I know all of us get calls, and we normally speak to Mr. Daugherty, and then he sends you out there to do our work for us.
I'm happy to do
Appreciate
it.
The two of you do excellent work, and I appreciate it. I know a lot of people that I've heard from in Palm City speak very highly of you.
I appreciate
that you're fair. Mr. Daugherty, I don't know if you were here this morning, but we had a resident who's been here before speaking about Palm City Farms and the commercial activity on residentially zoned properties. Can you, off the top of your head or with your team, give us some kind of a concept on how the system works? You know, people can make complaints, you know, that's going to be something that we'll have to address, it's, you know, in the near future, but any advice you can share, any part of understanding those concerns that people have?
Due to the nature of the process, adjudication, if we get a call or a complaint and staff goes out, we're not entitled to enter their property without their permission. So oftentimes, if it's on the back of 5 acres or behind the house, we may have very limited, almost impossible evidence to gather. We can't take pictures that someone else took. We have to go out and take them ourselves. If the person complaining is the next-door neighbor, allows us to enter their property and take pictures, that's an advantage. But if it's someone 2 or 3 houses away, sometimes it's very, very difficult to either gather that information. In one particular case, I know we had, the sheriff was in a helicopter looking for criminal activity or following up who gave us the information. So fortunate, we were able to get videos from the sheriff's activities. Short of that, we would not have been able to enter. So that's one of the huge challenges we have, gathering that information, not being able to enter the property. And I'd let John follow up on any of that.
Yeah, you know, as he said, you know, the burden of proof is on us. And there are some people out in that area that do not want code enforcement or any government entity or personnel on their property. So it does make it a little rough some days.
Okay, that's one thing. If you could contact my office, we're going to have to follow up on that. Do we fly drones? Do you guys use any drone technology?
I believe that is not able to be done through code
I think it's
enforcement.
prohibited.
Okay, just asking.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you do have the ability to go up with the helicopter, the sheriff's helicopter, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Anyone from the public looking to address? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentations.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll jump back to departmental number 1. Office of Management and Budget items which require board approval. There are 18 of them. They'll be presented by Ms. Jennifer Manning. Ms. Manning, before you start, I just wanted to publicly apologize if this morning during our very long agenda item while we were talking about where the funding comes and everything else, if I was in any way disrespectful to you or your team, that was not my intention. I am very fond of you personally, and I think professionally you're as good as it gets. So please accept my apology if I hurt you. I didn't mean to say that the numbers that you were presenting were not accurate. I was thinking of that number in my head that I had heard about the CRA number being $400,000. You were speaking about the money that was left over from the $400,000, and I was misunderstanding that you were saying $250,000. That's not what I meant. So I apologize.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jennifer Manning, OMB Director. Okay, the first item on the agenda is permission to apply for the FY23 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant. This is a request from the Sheriff's Office. If the grant is awarded, it will be $29,051. The funds will be used to offset the cost of equipment in the Traffic Department. The second item is permission to apply for funding through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection for the Eastern Flowway Kitchen Creek project. The requested amount of $500,000, requiring a $500,000 match, which is programmed in the CIP plan. Third item is permission, the Human Services Department is requesting permission to apply for the FY22 Edward Byrne Memorial Grant. The funding is expected to be $70,370. The funds will be utilized to support the case management staff for mental health programs. Item number 4 is permission, the Public Works Department is requesting permission to apply for the Inflation Reduction Act Urban and Community Forestry Grant in the amount of $4.3 million. There is no local match that is required for this. The funding will be used to launch a tree planting initiative on the public property in the disadvantaged census tract. The benefits will include carbon emissions, reduction in carbon emissions. It'll increase the shade, enhance the historic byways, as well as combating the negative effects of stormwater runoff.
Coolest grant application
Yeah.
ever.
No doubt. And Carly and Todd are doing a great job.
And also it goes to the disadvantaged census tracts, which I
Yeah.
also just love.
Nice. And it helps our environment a lot. Okay, the next item is permission to accept the Florida Department of State of Library and Information Services, the grant funding for FY 2023. The grant award is $88,833. The funds will be utilized for a full-time library specialist, equipment, books, and materials, and there is no match required. Item number 6 is permission to accept FDOT Public Transportation Grant Amendment Number 2 for Airport Operations Center and Airfield Electric Vault. The amendment number 2 adds $22,575, requiring $4,515 match to install additional 4x4 steel members and hangers to support the soffits. Of course, that's above me.
Really?
Item number 7 is permission to accept the amendment number 2 for FY23, a mosquito control agreement from the state of Florida. The amendment increases the grant amount by $9,822, and this will help to purchase chemicals. Item number 8 is permission to accept the year number 4, the Center of Disease Control Drug-Free Communities Grant. The funding is utilized in Martin County by the Martin County Action Coalition Work Group, and they focus on youth substance prevention. Year 4 is $125,000. The total grant for the 6-year period is $611,000, and there is no match required. Item number 9 is permission to accept a community services block grant in the amount of $100,584. This is for fiscal year 2024 to provide services to targeted residents in Martin County. Item number 10 is permission to accept the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity Development block grant for FY21 and 22. The amount of the grant is $750,000. It does not require a match. It supports the housing rehabs, demolition of housing, replacement of some housing for projects in the qualified area for qualified Martin County residents, if you will. Item number 11 is permission to accept grant amendment number 1 from FDEP for additional $2 million, and that was mentioned earlier today for the Salerno Monrovia vacuum sewer project. The additional $2 million will help to lower the principal amount of the assessment to residents by approximately $2,000 per parcel. Okay, item number 12, the Public Works Department is requesting a budget resolution to allocate unanticipated contribution for the County Road A1A to Monterey Road for the resurfacing project, and this is due to a utility conflict. The change order is $87,540. The City of Stewart agrees to pay $39,542 of that change order, and we're requesting approval of a budget resolution as well as a CIP amendment. Item number 13, staff is requesting a CIP amendment to the Constitutional Officers Building. This is a request that we had earlier this year. The clerk of the court requested a renovation of a bathroom, and she has additional renovations that she wants to include, which is like the staff work area, conference room. She wants to have an ADA compliance area, a carpet replacement, and this amount will cost approximately $61,000. That amount, that budget is, there's enough funding in our fixed asset replacement building CIP, so we're just asking to amend the CIP sheet to accommodate that. The next few items will be adjustment to the fiscal year budget FY 2023, and the first one is the staff is asking for the board to approve a resolution to increase the Sailfish Splash Water Park budget, and of course, this is the second time this year we've requested this increase from the board there for the Sailfish Splash. They've been very successful, and so we're requesting approval of a resolution of $289,000 with a corresponding expense for Sailfish Splash. Item number 15 is a request for funds for inmate medical for Martin County Sheriff's Office. During this fiscal year, we had our longtime provider of inmate services gave us a 30-day notice, and they withdrew from the program. The sheriff was able to engage another contractor. Unfortunately, it is a lot more expensive, and there's funding available in our medical services fund, and we're requesting $750,000 to cover the rest of the fiscal year.
So that's just to cover through September 30th?
Yeah, yeah. And that's why we had, we mentioned it in our budget presentation for the workshop that it was about 1.6 million.
What's the
increase.
FY '24 budget?
Yeah, it's like
We had to increase the budget almost to $2 million.
almost 2 million, yes. Mhm.
So, we can certainly present on this later, but we're working with the sheriff. We're also looking at other communities on how addressing inmate medical is, because once they become incarcerated, they become our responsibility, and how we can do it cheaper is something that St. Lucie County is struggling with. Indian River is just recently started a new experiment with another provider. So we're working with them to see how we may share our experiences and one, find a cheaper solution, and two, see if we can get the state to either contribute or change some of the laws to allow us to access other funds.
Okay, item number 16, Information Technology Department is requesting transfer from reserve in the amount of $22,459, and this is due to a contractor while performing an underground directional drilling. They had an accident there with their fiber optic cabling, and this is at Southwest Citrus Boulevard and Martin Highway, and we're requesting those funds to repair those lines.
Why isn't the contractor paying the bill?
Yeah, the contractor will, because usually we file it through our insurance, they go after the contractor, and once those funds come in, we'll put it back into the coffers.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, item number 17, request for funds for broadband again. This is another contractor error. This was along Northeast Dixie Highway in Jensen Beach, and this expense is $10,675, and the funds are coming from the broadband reserves. Final item is a request for funding. This is the General Services Department, the Vehicle Maintenance Division. Because of all the increase in costs of repairs and maintenance, we are requesting transfer from reserves when we need it. There is approximately 300,000 in reserves that we are anticipating that we'll use some of those funds, so we're asking the board to approve a transfer from reserves when it's needed. And that concludes my presentation.
Ms. Manning, thank you very much. Any other questions for Ms. Manning?
Move approval of Department 1.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Hurd for staff's recommendation of approval, seconded by Commissioner Heatherington. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Smith absent.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next agenda item is departmental number 2, contracts that meet the threshold for board approval, $1 million or greater. There are 4 of them. They'll be presented by Ms. Christy Brotherton. And Commissioner Heatherington will make us an announcement now.
Mr. Chair, can you separate out A1 and we will vote on that separately? I have a conflict as an employee of Ferrera, and although not the lowest bidder, I must abstain and have filed my Form 8B with the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take that one first, and then we will take them up the rest.
Good afternoon, Christy Brotherton, Chief Procurement Officer. Before we start, Commissioners, I have a couple housekeeping items for 2 of the items under this agenda. Based on Public Hearing 1, the board's direction to postpone the Port Salerno-New Monrovia project. With that being said, I need to withdraw items A2 and B1, which are both associated with that project. Item A2 is for the Port Salerno-New Monrovia Vacuum Sewer Collection System and Neighborhood Restoration Project. This is for the construction. Based on your direction, we will have to reject all the bids and cancel the solicitation, and we will go back out to bid at a later date and time at your direction. So I just wanted everyone to understand this is now done. We're releasing the contract under this bid. The same goes for item B1, which is construction engineering services for Port Salerno, New Monrovia Vacuum Sewer System. This was for, again, the construction engineering services. Same thing, we'll reject the bids and go back out.
Move to withdraw A2 and B1.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
We have a motion by Commissioner Hurd to withdraw A2 and B1. It was seconded by Commissioner Heatherington. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Smith absent.
Okay, and then moving on to item A1. This is for East Fork Creek Box Culvert Replacement Project. Staff is recommending that the board award the contract to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, which is Sunshine Land Design, in the amount of $2,053,294.49. Move that the board approve the revised CIP sheet to recognize the allocated American Rescue Plan Act clean water stormwater funding, and move that the board authorize the county administrator or designee to execute all documents related to this request.
Move approval of A1.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Hurd for A1, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 3-0 with Commissioner Smith absent and Commissioner Heatherington abstaining.
Thank you. And then moving on to item number 3, which is our continuing services contract for our financial auditing services. This contract has a maximum not to exceed value of $1,500,000 with a maximum not to exceed term of 5 years. And staff is recommending that the board award the contract to MSL PA and move that the board authorize the county administrator or designee to execute all documents related to this request. And that concludes this item.
Move approval of A3.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Hurd for staff's recommendation of approval for A3, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. That motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Smith absent.
Thank you.
Ms. Brotherton, thank you very much. Our next agenda item is departmental number 7, request adoption of the Martin County Library System 2024 through 2026 Long Range Services Plan. It'll be presented by award winner Jennifer Salas. Ms. Salas, good afternoon. You are recognized.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jen Salas, Library Director. So we are currently wrapping up a 3-year long-range services plan that we had a focus on aging adults. And we were very successful with working with our assisted living facilities, as well as starting a homebound delivery program where our couriers on their routes to our library branches will stop at people's homes who physically cannot leave their homes to get to our libraries. It's starting slowly, but as word spreads, we think it'll take off. And we're moving on to our next plan that will start in October. That will have a focus on the neurodivergent population. If you're not familiar with that population, it's a variety of different categories, including autism spectrum disorder, reading disabilities like dyslexia. It could include social anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other mental health conditions. So we are going to be working with this population side by side with our staff to identify the services that would be relevant to them, but we're preparing to create sensory-friendly spaces, as well as sensory-friendly kits that can be used within our buildings to be more welcoming to this population. So staff's recommendation is to adopt the 2024-2026 Long-Range Services Plan.
So moved.
Second.
Concise. That was the Reader's Digest version.
Yes.
Thank you. What?
That's why we love her. Great point.
Putting a lot of pressure on the next two agenda items. That was a motion to accept staff's recommendation by Commissioner Hurd, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Our next agenda item, Departmental Number 8, request approval to place a county-owned parcel on the board-approved surplus list for disposition by the auction contractor. It'll be presented by Ms. Carla Segura. Ms. Segura, welcome. You are recognized.
Segura, Real Property Manager. The Utilities Department did a property analysis and sent a recommendation to Real Property to add one of their vacant parcels located in Windermere, on Windermere Drive in Jensen Beach to the county surplus list. The parcel is located at 2230 Northwest Windermere. It's part of the Pine subdivision, and in their PUD process is when they, in the planning process is when they decided to donate this property as a well site. It's about 1/4 acre. Staff has verified all the information with the Pineapple Plantation Property Owners Association, and everything will be vetted through them. They will have association fees, assessments, and restrictions will go with the property. If approved to be placed on the surplus property list, staff will update the county website and process the sale according to Florida Statute 125.35 and 274.06 and move to the auction process through the county-approved auctioneer. We ask that the board authorize staff to place this vacant parcel on the county surplus list and process the sale in a manner to maximize the return to the county. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. This motion to accept staff's recommendation was approved by Commissioner Hurd, seconded by Commissioner Heatherington. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries 4-0. Mr. Gore, thank you. Someone will be joining you now? Says here that this next agenda item, Departmental Number 9, consideration and approval of the medical examiner ground lease and memorandum of the lease. It'll be presented by Ms. Kimberly Levy and Carla Segura. Here they are.
Morning, afternoon.
Yes, afternoon.
Carla Segura, Real Property Manager. This request is for approval of a ground lease and memorandum of lease for the new medical examiner facility to be built in St. Lucie County between the District Board of Trustees of Indian River State College and Martin, Indian, Okeechobee, and St. Lucie counties. The arrangements to the lease were set forth in the interlocal agreement, which was signed by all parties on November 7th, 2022. The need for the facility is to serve the residents of the counties as set forth in Florida Statute 406.085. The facility will provide autopsy and laboratory facilities. The district has The District Board of Trustees for Indian River State College owns approximately 50 acres on Kirby Loop Road, and they have agreed to lease 2 acres to the counties for construction of the facility. The lease terms agreed by the counties is 40 years with 1 additional 40-year renewal period at $1 a year. The physical impact for the divisions of cost for construction, repair, replacement, and maintenance of the facilities shall be calculated as set forth in the interlocal agreement with Martin County, having 22.42% of the cost. Funds have been contributed to the fund balance to cover the cost, and if expenditures are required before the end of FY23, a recommendation will be required to approve a transfer from the general fund. St. Lucie County also issues a monthly medical examiner briefing that they provide to the counties as an update. The recommendation is for the board to accept and approve the ground lease and memorandum of lease and authorize the chairman to execute any and all documents related to this transaction. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Questions? I have a comment. If you, when you have conversations with whoever else in the other communities that you're putting this together, I've been making a repeated request, that during this conversation that the building potentially be named in honor of the medical examiner that worked in that building for 20 years, Dr. Roger Middleman. And every time we have a conversation about it, I would like to continue to make that request. He was a Martin County resident. He oversaw many very high-profile cases, worked in that facility, and so at least as a memorial and an honor to him, since he worked in the old building for most of his career, that now that we build a new one, that hopefully everyone will agree that it should be named after him, Dr. Roger Middleman. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Thank you very much. We have a motion by Commissioner Hurd for staff's recommendation of approval, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries 4-0. And if I'm not mistaken, we have reached the end of our agenda.
Not even midnight.
You know, it's interesting, because we always talk about 5:05, end of the day public comment, and we're only a couple of minutes off of that. We could sit quietly for 5 minutes, so we get to that point. I think most of our staff would be glad to see this meeting end.
I know I am.
With that in mind, I would take any public comment at the end of the day. Seeing none, we would turn it back to County Commissioner comments. Commissioner Heatherington.
Two requests, maybe at our next meeting, a Sandsbrit boat ramp update.
Okay.
And the 714, 710 realignment progress with Okeechobee County.
With the meeting, yes.
Excellent suggestions.
Agreed.
Commissioner Jenkins. Commissioner Hurd.
I'm set.
I am also set. Mr. Donaldson, end of the day sage wisdom for us.
My comments are ended.
Ms. Woods. Thank you. With that, our next commission meeting is Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. Yes.
I just realized school's starting on Thursday, so I'd like to wish everybody a very successful start to their school year, and be safe in your travels, and watch for crossing guards and students crossing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And with that, the meeting is ended. Thank you.
Totally.